Chapter 1262. In the original God realm, the number of layers of the inner world determined one's combat strength and future achievements. At this moment, the vast first layer of the inner world had already been formed. It was filled with endless space-time power. Since it's the creation of the inner world, there should be complete Tao laws. The most important ones should be the changes in time and space. Lin Yu already had his own understanding. At this moment, he was taking that step. The power of the time and space laws was gradually entering the inner world. Plants began to grow, and the rise and fall of mountains and rivers gradually began to take shape. Birds, beasts, insects, fish, and other creatures also began to appear. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. Lin Yu's first layer of the inner world was finally formed. And now, he had completely mastered the space laws. And at this moment, 3 feet above Lin Yu's head, a lotus flower formed in the center. It was filled with endless mysteries. However, it was no longer shrouded in chaotic aura. Pop, the great Tao, was silent. After mastering the time and space laws, the lotus flower in the center bloomed. This was the condensation of Lin Yu's current Tao fruit. Among them, there was a small golden person sitting cross-legged with a slender figure. The small person inside was exactly the same as Lin Yu. However, his eyes were slightly closed, with a sense of tranquility and peace. This was the current Lin Yu. On the left and right were the condensation of the previous and future Lin Yu's Tao fruits. Now, for unknown reasons, it couldn't bloom. It contained a terrifying power. Without a doubt, this paved a great Tao for Lin Yu's future path. As the current Lin Yu's Tao fruit appeared, Lin Yu's second layer of the inner world also began to appear. In the end, it slowly condensed. The majestic power directly manifested in the void. Luo, who was traveling in the 12 universes, had already sensed this aura. However, she didn't come. Luo knew that this movement was caused by Lin Yu. However, as Lin Yu broke through, his inner world actually began to reflect the entire 12 universes. It was like a vast universe that enveloped the entire 3 realms and 5 regions. Although it was very illusory, it carried endless mighty power. Its size did not seem to be weaker than the 12 universes. This was only the first level of Lin Yu's inner world, but it already had such a terrifying scene. The second layer was formed. The space here was completely different from the first floor. It was filled with a desolate aura. Following Lin Yu's breakthrough, the aura of the 12 universes enveloped Lin Yu's inner world. At this time, Qin Wunyan and the others also began to break through due to the reflection of Lin Yu's inner world. The entire 12 universes were like bamboo shoots after the spring rain. The cultivators inside began to break through one after another. Because Lin Yu was breaking through to the original God realm, the competence of the 12 universes had increased by 1 level. The third level's inner world began to converge. At this moment, Luo was by the side of a large river. Looking at the illusory image of the inner world in the sky, he muttered, "Not bad. It's already the 3rd level." The original God realm could condense the first level of the inner world. It was already enough to be called the ancestor of the current 12 universes. Condensing the 3rd level of the inner world would make one a proud son of heaven in ancient times. But this was not the end. After the 3rd level was condensed, then the 4th level, the 5th level, Luo could not sit still anymore. He stood up and stared at the changes in the sky. Su Yixue, who was on the side, also narrowed her beautiful eyes. From the ancient books, she knew the meaning of the number of levels of the inner world. Now, Lin Yu had condensed the 5th level. Among the creatures that had broken through to the original God realm, he was already in existence that was as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Moreover, the 4th and 5th levels were almost condensed in one go. Lin Yu still had energy left. After the 6th level, the speed of Lin Yu's condensing of the inner world slowed down significantly. At this moment, the commotion caused by Lin Yu's breakthrough, it had already shaken the nearby universes. In the 8th universe, the supreme grand disciple who was in deep sleep, the bloated ancient god, opened his eyes at this moment. He is breaking through. With this power, I'm afraid that the number of levels condensed in the inner world has already exceeded the 6th level. This was the first time in a long time that the ancient god of the 8th universe had such a serious expression. He directly disappeared from the land of hibernation, stepped into the territory gate, and came to the 12 universes. His eyes shot out 2 gray lights and looked in the direction of Lin Yu. In fact, the entire universe was now reflected in Lin Yu's inner world. Qin Wenyin and the others also had a premonition of the benefits of Lin Yu's breakthrough. It could be said that when a person achieves the Tao, even his chickens and dogs will ascend to heaven. He had already sent out a message asking Lin Xiao, the Dark Divine Official, and the others in other universes to quickly return. This was a huge benefit to their cultivation. This was also the reverse nurturing of an original god breaking through in his own universe. The 7th level was condensing, but now there was a bottleneck. Lin Yu began to operate the power of time and space. At the same time, the power of the Grand Supreme began to be injected into the 7th level of the inner world. Only now is he using the power of the Grand Supreme. This child is really amazing. Luo sensed the aura of the ancient god of the 8th universe and now appeared beside him. Greetings, junior uncle. The godly king of the 8th universe was no longer lazy at this time. He was staring in the direction of Lin Yu's breakthrough. I thought you didn't recognize me, Luo said jokingly. Little Nightmare wouldn't dare. The ancient god of the 8th universe cupped his hands and said at this time. In fact, the ancient god of the 8th universe was a little older than Luo. The two were in the same era. They were all sealed before the ancient history and only came out after the chaos had passed. But Luo's seniority was there. But as for why the ancient god of the 8th universe called Luo junior uncle, and the relationship between the first godly kings of the 8th universe and the 5th universe, it was unknown. After using the power of the Grand Supreme, Lin Yu's 7th level of the inner world began to appear. Maybe this person is the one who was divined by Supreme back then, the one who will face the calamity in the future. Luo fell into memories at this time. In the past, a Supreme's divination technique was the best in both ancient and modern times. He had once divined a glimmer of hope for the future. At this time, they looked at Lin Yu with a solemn expression. Do you think he will condense the legendary 9th level? Luo said slowly to the ancient god of the 8th universe beside him. It's not impossible. The ancient god of the 8th universe, Nightmare, replied. But now, both of them were secretly worried. They came from that era and knew what it meant to condense the 9th level of the inner world. It already involved a taboo. It was unspeakable. In the blink of an eye, 50 years had passed. The current Lin Yu seemed to be gradually unable to hold on. The 8th level had already begun to condense, but it was very slow. It seemed like it would take a long time to succeed. It seems like it's not very possible. Nightmare sighed. Luo shook his head. At this time, Lin Yu used the power of time of the godly king order to accelerate the time around him. At the same time, it resonated with the Tao of time that he had mastered. The 8th level of the inner world began to form at an astonishing speed. This caused Nightmare's expression to change involuntarily. Don't forget the methods of the Supreme of the 12 universes back then. Luo seemed to have guessed this scene long ago. He has also mastered the laws of time and space. Nightmare looked in Lin Yu's direction and thought of the Supreme of the 12 universes that he had only met a few times back then. He muttered, in terms of temperament, there are some similarities. I wonder if he can reach the level of that Supreme back then. Chapter 1263. Between the two's conversation. Lin Yu's 8th layer inner world had been completely condensed. At this moment, Lin Yu was sitting cross-legged, sinking into silence. Everything was stagnant. It seemed that Lin Yu was exhausted and couldn't continue condensing the 9th layer inner world. If it's the 8th layer inner world, Luo shook his head. He had experienced that era. It wasn't that the heavens' pride of that era hadn't condensed the 8th layer inner world, but their achievements hadn't reached the supreme level. The 8th layer and the 9th layer are the difference between heaven and earth. If you can't condense the 9th layer, reaching the supreme level is just a fool's dream. Luo also shook his head. 200 years had passed since Lin Yu had broken through to the original God realm. However, Luo, Yin, and Su Yishui hadn't left. They had been watching. They all hoped that Lin Yu could have greater achievements. However, to be able to condense the 8th layer inner world in this era is already amazing enough. Luo said, in the war of that era, the foundation of the great Tao had been destroyed. Now that the heavenly Tao is incomplete, it's hard to give birth to such experts. Just when the two thought that Lin Yu had reached his limit, 20 years had passed. It was like a snap of the fingers. Above the 8th layer, great power began to appear. This, Luo and Yin were shocked. Lin Yu had started to condense the 9th layer inner world after 20 years. However, Lin Yu seemed to be just trying. The 9th layer hadn't even appeared yet. So he's been accumulating. Luo suddenly realized. Before Lin Yu condensed the inner world, he didn't seem to be strenuous. He should still have some strength left. However, the 9th layer involved a taboo. Although Lin Yu didn't have anyone to guide him, the first ancient character he had mastered gave birth to a vague feeling in his heart. He had deduced some things, and now he could confirm it. He had 80% confidence in his heart, so he started to condense the 9th layer inner world. The great power was like the creation of the world. At this moment, the Dark God Priest and the others had returned. They were sitting cross-legged outside, using the reverse nurturing from Lin Yu's breakthrough to the original God realm to increase their cultivation base rapidly. Some of the divine kings were showing signs of breaking through again. This was especially so for the great solar boundless Buddha Lord. Because of the ancient word that Lin Yu had passed down, his body was currently shrouded in a layer of mysterious energy. It was extremely profound. He had already begun to attempt to break through to the ancestor realm. If that was the case, the 12 universes would become even more powerful. The power of an ancestor realm already belonged to the pinnacle of a universe. As long as such a powerhouse appeared, it represented the prosperity of a universe. It's no wonder that the cosmos with original God realm experts is so prosperous. The Dark Divine Priest said slowly. The reverse nurturing at the original God realm was too frightening. It could make all the living beings in the universe receive the favor. However, they could also feel how difficult it was for Lin Yu to break through. At this moment, there were only wishes in his heart. In the later stages of cultivation, the process of breaking through would often be extremely dangerous, and one could easily be consigned to eternal damnation. Therefore, the Jade Pure Goddess, Qin Yi, and the others were filled with endless worries. The Jade Pure Goddess appeared to be more indifferent. After experiencing so many things together, she knew that with Lin Yu's talent, breaking through to the original God realm should not be a problem. However, Lin Yu is only stepping into a higher realm now. He needed to reach the legendary 9th level of the original God realm. He's about to succeed. Luo was pleasantly surprised. He could clearly see it. Lin Yu's power had become incomparably mysterious, as if it did not belong to the world and had transcended. The world could no longer imprint his shadow. The 9th level of the inner world was slowly condensing, and it already had an embryonic form. However, at this moment, there was a sudden change. A mysterious force appeared in Lin Yu's inner world. One could see that black spots began to appear on Lin Yu's body, making him look ferocious and terrifying. The taboo has appeared. Luo's eyes widened. They knew some secrets. If a cultivator wanted to break through to the original God realm and condense the 9th level of the inner world, all kinds of strange things would happen. They would either die suddenly, get lost, or have an indescribable change in their body. At this moment, black spots began to appear on Lin Yu's body. They looked like livor mortis, but they had a certain shape. It was like some kind of supreme rune with a strange aura. Lin Yu's life aura was rapidly fading. Even the shadow of the inner world that was reflected in the 12 universes began to shatter, gradually eroded by the black spots. What happened? The great sun boundless Buddha had now revealed the aura of the ancestor realm. His gaze was deep as he looked in the direction of Lin Yu's breakthrough. These black spots made people feel fear on a deep level. Everyone was so shocked that they were speechless. They stood rooted to the ground. The great Tao origin of the 12 universes was being eroded. Luo and Yin made their move. They had both inherited the supreme means. They came to the 12 universes and used some kind of ancient technique to suppress the changes in the 12 universes. Not long after, their expressions became grave. Even if they used the supreme inheritance, they still felt that it was difficult to resist this trend. At this moment, they were gradually unable to hold on. How profound was the inheritance of the Supreme Being? Suddenly, 4 red pillars appeared in the 12 universes. The supreme runes on them began to prevent the black spots from spreading. At the same time, Yan's power skyrocketed again. A white-green light appeared. Great dream heaven art. Nightmare used its supreme inheritance, and the black spots disappeared for a short while. But as time passed, their realms were not enough to use the supreme inheritance in its entirety. Then, Lin used strange changes. The power of the black spots became blazing, spreading to the entire universe. No, we have to deal with the origin. Luo's forehead was already covered in cold sweat. As a late-stage original God Realm expert, he could no longer suppress the strange changes of an original God Realm cultivator who was breaking through. Condensing the 9th level of the inner world is indeed terrifying, Yin said slowly. He was no longer lazy and used all his strength. There's no other way now. We can only hope that Lin Yu can resist this strange black spots. Luo and Yin began to resist the black spots to the greatest extent, preventing them from spreading further. 10 years passed. The black spot had reached its peak. They were like numerous black ancestral dragons, vast and boundless, enveloping the 12 universes. The strange runes on them began to corrode heaven and earth. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Lin Yu's body had already been corroded beyond recognition. His cheeks were covered in black spots. But suddenly he opened his eyes. It turned out that he had been waiting for an opportunity, which was when the black spots were at their peak. Only then would the strange origin truly appear. This was also why Lin Yu had stopped for a period of time after condensing the 8th level of the inner world. Through the power of the first origin rune, he had foreseen the threat that would follow. Several Taoist principles appeared in Lin Yu's inner world, which had been corroded beyond recognition. The time and space laws transformed into 2 supreme sword lights that cut through time and space. They charged toward him. He's going to kill himself. Luo's expression changed drastically. They were already exhausted from resisting the black spots. Could it be that Lin Yu had recovered his clarity and discovered that he couldn't remove the indescribable changes in his body? Could it be that he wanted to kill himself and destroy the black spots with him? No! Qinyi saw what Lin Yu was doing and fell to the ground. After several hundred years of breakthroughs, could it be that in the end, he would only end up killing himself? Chapter 1264. The sword chi formed by time and space laws instantly penetrated Lin Yu's eroded body. Boom! The 12 universes shook. Blood rained down between heaven and earth. The black spot and Lin Yu's inner world dissipated at the same time. The blood rain infected every region of the 12 universes. This was a phenomenon that occurred because of the fall of a godly king. Heaven's wail. Billions of beings also sensed it. They knelt on the ground, tears flowing from their eyes. Because of Lin Yu's existence, the 12 universes prospered. But now, Lin Yu had passed away. Because of the destruction of time and space laws, Lin Yu's existence had been obliterated. The statues built in the 3 realms and 5 regions had been shattered. They turned into powder and dissipated between heaven and earth. Divine King Lin is the greatest in history. How could he die just because of a breakthrough? The dark priest murmured in a low voice, unable to believe this fact. The godly king's order has the power of time and space, but Lin Yu used time and space laws to destroy himself. Maybe he really can't come back. Luo analyzed. Su Yixue stood in the void in a daze. Although she hadn't known Lin Yu for long, She was deeply attracted to Lin Yu. Now that Lin Yu had passed away, Su Ishue's eyes were slack, and her realm was in an unstable state. Godly King Lin, you can't die like this. Little Holy King, where are you? Are you lying to me again? Qini's eyes were full of tears. She had known Lin Yu for a long time and had gone through many things together. Qini didn't believe that the confident and powerful Lin Yu would die like this. The veterans who had followed Lin Yu all the way from the Hongmeng continent all the way to Heaven City stood by Lin Yu's side. They didn't shed a single tear as they knelt on the ground and placed their weapons on the ground. The beings of the 12 universes fell silent. You haven't led us to build an immortal era. Qin Wunyan trembled. However, no matter what they said, there was no response. At this moment, Lin Yu's inner world shadow had completely dissipated between heaven and earth, not leaving a single trace. Qini had already fainted from crying. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden was also trembling. 500 years passed just like that. The Jade Pure Goddess and the others were all dressed in plain clothes. They had stayed in the main hall for 500 years, not leaving at all. They just stood there in a daze. They wanted to condense a statue of Lin Yu, but each time, they suffered a huge backlash. Lin Yu's body had become a taboo. Su Ishue also didn't return to the 5th universe. Instead, she stayed with Goddess Yuqing and the others to guard the coffin. This showed her true feelings for Lin Yu. Luo and Nightmare had already left and returned to their respective universes. They had witnessed the fall of a genius of their generation, and all of them were filled with regret. If the heaven and earth were not incomplete, perhaps Lin Yu would have really condensed 90% of his inner world. An era beheads a genius. Those were the last words they said before they left. The years were changing. Without the existence of Lin Yu, the 6th and 7th universes had begun to stir. They wanted to take action and occupy the 2nd, 3rd, and 10th universes. They wanted to obtain endless resources from them. Due to the universe's agreement, they had been hindering them secretly. Lin Yu's death was great news for them. At the same time, some who had been neutral also secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Lin Yu's existence was a huge pressure for them. Like a huge rock, they had to be vigilant at all times. Although Lin Yu had already promised that he wouldn't take action and conquer other universes. But as long as Lin Yu existed, no one could stop him when he reached the invincible realm. The ancient gods of the 7th and 6th universes had already begun to secretly discuss. Now, after leaving the 12 universes, the ancient gods of the 5th and 8th universes had fallen into a deep sleep again because they had consumed too much energy. Now is a rare opportunity. Maybe we can find an opportunity to take the 4 universes under our command. The ancient god of the 6th universe was a skinny old man. At this time, he and the ancient god of the 7th universe were sitting in the main hall. The god kings of the 6th and 7th universes stood quietly on the side. My master is about to return from the realm C. Why don't we find an excuse to completely obliterate the forces of the 12 universes in 100 years? The ancient god of the 7th universe said slowly. Now that they don't have the protection of the arrogant god kings of the 12 universes, let's see who else can protect them. The ancient god of the 6th universe continued. They already had full confidence in their success. There's no hurry. Let's put pressure on the people of the 12 universes first. If they take the initiative, then it's okay. Otherwise, the ancient god of the 7th universe had a cold look in his eyes. At this time, although the great sun Boundless Buddha and the others had made great progress in their realms, but they also realized something. There were invaders in the other 3 universes from time to time. The great sun Boundless Buddha had been injured many times. The enemy was very powerful, and they were holding original God Realm artifacts. If the great sun Boundless Buddha hadn't grasped half of the ancient word, he might have been killed. The current great sun Boundless Buddha was one of the only 2 ancestor realm powerhouses in the 12 universes. As long as he fell, the 12 universes would completely decline. After resisting many invasions, Lin Xiu also realized something. In the 12 universes, all the powerhouses had returned and began to discuss. After God King Lin left, the other universes began to stir again. Qin Wunyan said helplessly. Because the 12 universes had the means left by Lin Yu and Su Yishui, there were no strong enemies to invade. But they had encountered many explorations. Do we have to give up the second, third, and 10th universes? Sea God Dragon was worried. At this time, he was already at the late stage of the God King realm. But there was worry in his eyes. This is the foundation that God King Lin led us to. How can we give it up? The Dark Priest said loudly. Our 12 universes are not weaker than others. If the other universes have designs on us, we won't hesitate to fight. After so many years, although Lin Jianyu was still like a child, his mind had matured a lot. He now had the strength of the middle stage ancestor realm, and his words carried weight. The discussion lasted for 3 consecutive days. However, most of the people who advocated protecting the foundation that Lin Yu led them to did not hesitate to fight. Especially Lin Xiao. Although he was taciturn, he also opened his mouth at this time. Wait for me to break through. Lin Xiao was already at the half-step ancestor realm at this time. If not for his previous injuries, he would have broken through to the ancestor realm long ago. Moreover, the power in his body was very mysterious and had a strange aura, but he maintained his rationality and did not fall into it. There was a determination in his eyes, as if he had made some important decision. The great sun Boundless Buddha looked at Lin Xiao and did not say a word. He also knew what Lin Xiao was preparing to do. Be careful, the Dark Priest reminded. Lin Xiao walked out of the hall, returned to the 10th universe, and began his closed-door cultivation. And at this time, ancient tokens appeared in the various universes, reflecting in the sky. 1,500 years, the Universe Conference was to be held again. Obviously, this time, it was also targeted at the 12 universes. Without Lin Yu holding down the fort, the other universes began to stir. Chapter 1265. Although the upper echelons of the 12 universes were angry, they couldn't hide in the 12 universes. Unfortunately, my master has fallen into a deep slumber. Su Yishui's expression was solemn. If it weren't for ancient god Luo protecting the 12 universes, all life would have died, Great Sun Boundless Buddha said. Because Luo used a big method to suppress the black spot, she suffered a backlash. She had a big problem in the first place, and now she needed to rest for a long time. Don't worry, as long as I'm here, I won't let the 12 universes be hurt. Su Yishui promised before leaving because of the universe meeting. In the face of Su Yishui's kindness, Qin Wunyan and the others bowed deeply. Goddess Yuqing and the others now knew Su Yishui's feelings for Lin Yu. However, regarding Su Yishui's actions after Lin Yu's death, he didn't mind at all. In the blink of an eye, 70 years passed. At this time, in the long river of time, 3 golden lotuses were rooted in the upper, middle, and lower reaches of the long river of time, emitting endless mysterious power. Even after endless years, there was still some kind of connection. The mysterious aura on it slowly gathered toward the golden lotus in the middle. Until a certain moment, it gradually became chaotic. The power was gathering, and the golden particles slowly condensed in a certain place. When it reached a critical point, there was a cocoon forming. It emitted the power of time and space. The Divine King's order floated outside. The long river of time couldn't affect it. In the mysterious cocoon, a figure gathered. In the long river of time, there was no concept of time. Lin Yu sat cross-legged in the big cocoon condensed by time and space, calm and peaceful. It was unknown how much time had passed. Lin Yu's figure completely condensed, and the big cocoon broke. Above his head, 3 golden lotuses appeared again. At this time, the mysterious power above entered his body, building an invincible battle body. At the same time, his divine sense also became incomparably solid, and the jar still existed in his sea of consciousness. The laws of time and space became solid, revolving around Lin Yu's body. In his inner world, the 9th level appeared and became incomparably solid. The mysterious power made his figure illusory. He seemed to have transcended history. This was also why the beings of the 12 universes including the Jade Pure Goddess, have been unable to condense a statue of Lin Yu in the past 1,000 years. Because Lin Yu had fused with 3 Tao fruits, there was no longer any trace of him in history. There was nothing that could engrave his figure. Even in the minds of the 12 cosmoses, Lin Yu's appearance had gradually faded away. Only someone as powerful as the great sun boundless Buddha Venerable, or the Jade Pure Goddess, and Chinese obsession would not have completely forgotten about Lin Yu. In the long river of time, Lin Yu was as calm as an ancient well. The condensation of the inner heaven and earth of the 9th level did not seem to be the end. At this moment, the 3 golden lotuses 3 feet above Lin Yu's head began to move. At this moment, they actually began to enter Lin Yu's body. Lin Yu's Tao fruits in this life were still all right, but the Tao fruits in his previous and future lives were extremely terrifying. They were already at the highest level. Now that they had entered his body, even if they were shackled by the power of Tao and truth, they were still terrifying. However, Lin Yu did not die again. After the golden lotuses entered Lin Yu's body, they followed a specific trajectory. They entered his inner world. Lin Yu's inner world was filled with wind and thunder. Chaos filled the air, destroying everything. However, his inner world was quickly reborn. Boom! It was as if heaven and earth were splitting apart. Lin Yu's inner world shook violently. There seemed to be a mustard seed forming on the 9th level. Then, it slowly formed an inner world. Lin Yu was actually opening up the 10th level of his inner world because of the Tao fruits in this life. This had already surpassed the taboo. Because Lin Yu had comprehended the Tao law of time, he had condensed his Tao fruits in his previous and future lives into his body. At this moment, such a mysterious change had occurred. The 10th level of his inner world. This was something that had never happened before in ancient history. The 9th level was already a taboo. All sorts of strange and ominous things would happen. However, after forming the 9th level, Lin Yu did not stop. His Tao fruits took root in the mustard seed and opened up another inner world. Then, the Tao fruits of his previous life also appeared above the 10th level of his inner world. Boom, boom, boom. In the endless chaos, a gray aura filled the air. The 11th level of his inner world was formed. Then, the Tao fruits of his future life took root in the mustard seed and formed the 12th level of his inner world. This was something that had never happened since ancient times. Even the utmost being in the original God realm had only formed the 9th level of his inner world. The formation of the 12th level of his inner world was completely different from the other inner worlds. The 9th level of his inner world was filled with chaotic aura. There were no mountains, rivers, or plants. There was only a pond and 2 golden lotuses rooted in it. Lin Yu's Tao fruits of his present life turned into a human figure in that inner world. He also had a supreme power and sat cross-legged under an ancient tree. He was calm and peaceful. The last 3 inner worlds that appeared were constantly chanting scriptures. It was incomparably mysterious. With Lin Yu's current realm, it was hard for him to understand the profound meaning. However, Lin Yu did not delve into it. His figure appeared at the place where he had passed away all those years ago. He did not know that 1,600 years had passed. In his memory, it was only an instant. He had truly broken through to the original God realm. With a single thought, he knew the current situation. However, his figure had not completely condensed in the present world. Countless particles were still gathering towards him. 100 years had passed. In the first universe, at the Cosmos Convention, Lin Xiao, who was surrounded by black aura and a rotten aura, went alone. His current realm was shocking. He had reached the original God realm. The ancient gods and god kings of the other universes had already arrived at the main hall. Lin Xiao walked very slowly. After arriving at the main hall, he put down the coffin on his back. His eyes were calm. The expressions of all the ancient gods and god kings froze. They thought that Lin Yu had revived again. However, from his aura and clothes, they could tell that this was not Lin Yu. Lin Xiao was dressed in black. He sat in the main hall with a coffin beside him. He had an intimidating aura. The God Kings of the Fifth Universe could not help but frown. It seemed that Lin Xiu was prepared to fight to the death this time. Since the people of the other universes have arrived, let's begin, Celestial Venerable House said. Everyone was surprised by Lin Xiu's realm. They did not expect that there would be an original God realm expert in the 12 universes. I did not expect that someone in the 12 universes would take the initiative to come into contact with the darkness. The ancient god of the 7th universe was the first to attack. Beside him sat a middle-aged man with snow-white hair, sword-like eyebrows, and starry eyes. However, one could feel the endless vicissitudes of life in his eyes. From Lin Xiu's aura, he could tell that Lin Xiu had cultivated with the help of a strange power to reach the original God realm. The 12 universes, no wonder they developed so quickly. Coming into contact with the darkness and breaking the taboo, they should be killed. The ancient god of the 6th universe said at this time. No need to give a high-sounding reason. Those who are not satisfied with the 12 universes ruling the 3 universes can come up and fight. I am Lin Xiu of the 12 universes. I am here on behalf of the God Kings. Lin Xiu did not say much. If he did not attend this meeting, when the 6th and 7th universes raised their troops, the 12 universes would not be able to resist. It would cause the universe to be devastated. It was better to settle everything here. Lin Xiu had already made up his mind to die. He would kill as many people as he could. He would kill until the people who were against the 12 universes were terrified. Lin Xiu's aura was like a rainbow. Even if he knew that he would not be able to return, he was still fearless. Chapter 1266. Now that Lin Yu had fallen, he must shoulder this responsibility. Universe 5 Sui Shui was slightly moved. Looking at Lin Yu, he seemed to have the shadow of Lin Yu. At this time, he was equally overbearing. Ignorant brat, today, I will completely erase you. Universe XXD, ancient god stood up at this time. Go to the extraterritorial battlefield. His aura locked onto Lin Xiu. Universe 7's ancient god also spoke at this time. In any case, the current 12 universes may have come into contact with darkness and absolutely cannot tolerate it. After this time, thoroughly investigate the 12 universes. His tone was cold and detached, but this was just an excuse for him to conquer the 12 universes. Everyone present knew the purpose of Universe 7's ancient god. It was just that they didn't say it out loud. At this time, the ancient god of the 9th universe also spoke. I think what the fellow Taoist of the 7th universe said is right. We can't tolerate the arrival of darkness in the universe. If that's the case, the efforts of the predecessors and sages of the land of origin will be in vain. The heroes who have passed away in the entire history of the universe will be meaningless. The most important thing is for the safety of our universe. This matter must be done. Universe 7's ancient god spoke on behalf of his master. Then let's see if you have the ability. Lin Xiu didn't give any explanation. He took a step forward and went directly to the extraterritorial battlefield. The scene was silent. Among the 12 universes, many universes had studied strange substances and wanted to make use of them. But to think that Lin Xiu didn't get lost after using the strange substances to have the combat strength of the original God realm, this made them feel surprised. Take him down and study his Tao fruit. In Universe 7, the creature that returned from the realm C said at this time. He was interested in Lin Xiu. At this time, Lin Xiu and Universe 6's God King had already arrived at the extraterritorial battlefield. All the God Kings and ancient gods came to watch the battle. The extraterritorial battlefield of Universe 1 was full of traces of battle. In the past, Universe 1 was extremely prosperous, and the number of original God realm powerhouses was more than 5. It was common for fierce battles to occur in the foreign battlefields. Thus, this area had the original God realm's Tao vestige, which hadn't scattered after so many years. Thus, the foreign battleground of the first universe was very stable. Even when the original God realm warriors fought, they couldn't destroy it completely. Boy, the general trend of your 12 universes is gone. Now that you have been beheaded, perhaps I can consider preserving a drop of your bloodline in the 12 universes, rather than completely cutting it off. The ancient god of Universe 6 had a cruel look in his eyes. Do you think that you can act presumptuously in front of us just because you have the fighting strength of the original god realm, like the God King in the past? The ancient god of Universe 6 continued to speak with a thick sense of ridicule. He had already sensed that Lin Xiu's cultivation was not very condensed. At this moment, he had the fighting competence of the original god realm. However, he had spoiled his own foundation through excessive enthusiasm. Even if Lin Xiu survived this convention, it would be difficult for him to make any progress. His life had already stagnated here. Even his lifespan was running out. Lin Xiu ignored the ancient god of Universe 6. Lin Xiu made his move. As he raised his hand, it was a killing move. Endless dark power surged in the extraterritorial battlefield and enveloped the entire battlefield in an instant. Lin Xiu was the Lord of Darkness at this moment. Even though he was dressed in black, he appeared so conspicuous in the endless night. It was as if he was now standing at the end of the world. The boundless dark matter transformed into 9 great dragons, each of which was comparable to the primordial stars. The figure of the Holy Spirit seemed so inconspicuous under the giant dragon. The ancient god of Universe 6 was fearless. He slowly spread out his hands, and a magnificent river appeared. It converged in a certain place, forming an endless sea, trapping the giant dragon in it. The black dragon was struggling. It breathed in and out. Lin Xiu directly detonated the black dragon. The endless essence shook the space of the extraterritorial battlefield, creating terrifying cracks. The sea was also shattering. Lin Xiu and the ancient god of Universe 6 retreated a few hundred feet at the same time. Blood flowed out from the corners of their mouths. This was a way to fight with one's life. Lin Xiu didn't hesitate to damage his own origin to seriously injure the ancient god of Universe 6. The effect was also very good. Fellow Taoist of Universe 6, be careful. This kid doesn't plan to go back this time. The ancient god of Universe 7 looked at Lin Xiu's fighting method at this time and was slightly moved. Lin Xiu's fighting method made every original god realm cultivator here shocked. The ancient god of Universe 6 narrowed his eyes and stared at Lin Xiu. After Lin Xiu retreated, he didn't stop at all. He once again activated the cultivation of his whole body. Black gas surged around him, and almost in the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of the ancient god of Universe 6. He punched out majestically. Black gas lingered around his fist. Lin Xiu's combat body was also incomparably powerful. Even the ancient god of Universe 6 was already on guard. But in Lin Xiu's almost desperate fighting method, he was also injured here, and his chest was almost penetrated. If it wasn't for the fact that he was an original god realm powerhouse and was in an immortal and indestructible state. Perhaps under Lin Xiu's fist with dark matter attached, the ancient god of Universe 6 might have already fallen at this time. Even so, the ancient god of Universe 6 didn't have it easy. His wound was filled with corrosive dark matter, constantly devouring the vitality of his body. These ancient gods who stayed in the universe had originally suffered injuries, so their combat strength hadn't reached the peak of the original god realm. Even if they had mastered the complete Tao law, the ancient god of Universe 6 was still very uncomfortable. He felt aggrieved, because he wanted to kill Lin Xiu, but he didn't want to die here. He was restricted everywhere and had scruples with every move. But Lin Xiu didn't have such thoughts. He just wanted to kill the ancient god of Universe 6. Even his own body was almost shattered under the attack of the ancient god of Universe 6. But he still seriously injured the ancient god of Universe 6. Everyone's expression changed. Lin Xiu's state moved several ancient gods and god kings who were in neutral universes. No wonder the 12 universes can rise quickly in this era in a short period of time. The ancient god of the 11th universe said with admiration at this time, "Temperament and talent are all the best." If he hadn't spent some time comprehending the dark matter in order to protect the 12 universes, his future would have been limitless. But now that Lin Xiu had taken this step, it was impossible to turn back. After a few more moves, The extraterrestrial battlefield of the first universe was fragmented. Lin Xiao and the ancient god of Universe 6 stood in the shattered void. At this time, Lin Xiao was bleeding profusely, and the black blood looked very sinister. Madman, do you really want to die? The ancient god of Universe 6 clutched his chest and forcibly recovered from his injuries. But now, he was already terrified in his heart. He felt Lin Xiao's blazing fighting spirit and his determination to face death unflinchingly. It wasn't like when he brought the coffin to hold the grand meeting. In the battle, the ancient god of Universe 6 could feel it more and more. Now he was terrified. Lin Xiao's combat strength also surprised him. Obviously, he hadn't really broken through to the original god realm, but his combat strength was unparalleled. He was definitely not weaker than an ordinary original god realm expert. Now, the ancient god of Universe 6 had already brought out his inner world. Chapter 1267. An endless sea was formed in an instant. It kept pushing towards Lin Xiao's position. The sea occupied the entire extraterritorial battlefield with an unstoppable momentum. Lin Xiao remained calm and drew a mysterious mark in the air with his hands. The endless dark matter returned to his body. The current Lin Xiao was the one between heaven and earth. He could break through anything and nothing could stop him. Just by standing there, the void was vanishing. Everyone was shocked by the combat strength that Lin Xiao displayed at this time. He didn't condense his inner world, but this time, he was even more powerful than the ancient god who had condensed his inner world. He was now enveloped by the inner world of the ancient god of Universe 6. However, the boundless sea was unable to get within 100 feet of him. He was like a god in the darkness. All the attacks in the world couldn't affect him. But the inner world of the ancient god was hard to predict. Lin Xiao's physical body was constantly being eroded. As he kept approaching the ancient god of Universe 6, he began to gradually become illusory. But Lin Xiao still had no intention of retreating. The ancient god of Universe 6 revealed a ruthless look in his eyes and said, "Since you insist on seeking death, don't blame me." He began to drive his inner world with all his strength. In the original god realm, as long as one stood in their own inner world, they were an invincible existence, and no one could kill him. Therefore, he had absolute confidence that he could completely erase Lin Xiao, this scourge. By now, he was already starting to feel fear in his heart. He was afraid that if he continued to fight, he might really be killed by Lin Xiao in the end. At this time, Lin Xiao's figure was almost completely dim and his existence was gradually being erased. Everyone thought that Lin Xiao was now in a situation of certain death. But at this moment, something strange happened. Unknowingly, a wisp of black gas appeared behind the ancient god of Universe 6, who was driving his inner world with all his strength. Although it was very weak, it attracted everyone's attention. Fellow Taoist of Universe 6, be careful. The ancient god of Universe 7 reminded at this time. The black gas quickly condensed and turned into Lin Xiao's appearance. Lin Xiao's face was indifferent, and he just said indifferently, "Too late." His right palm turned into a claw and directly crushed the head of the ancient god of Universe 6. Then, the black gas on his body surged, wanting to directly refine the ancient god of Universe 6, completely obliterate him. Everything happened so quickly that no one could react in time. Although Lin Xiao came with the determination to die, he did not blindly clash head-on. He used the method he had comprehended. In the battlefield, he had set up a method that allowed him to switch positions with the imprint. His illusory figure wasn't caused by the suppression of the inner world of the ancient gods of the 6th universe. This was just to bewitch the ancient gods of Universe 6. His real killing move was behind the ancient god of Universe 6. Thief who has fallen into darkness, how dare you? The ancient god of Universe 7 stood up. He stepped directly into the battlefield. Universe 7 had already formed an alliance with Universe 6. Now, seeing that their ally was about to die, the ancient gods of Universe 7 could no longer sit still. He stepped directly into the battlefield. He had used his most powerful means. His inner world enveloped the area, and countless ancient trees towered into the sky. The vines were like dragons that coiled around Lin Xiao with an immortal aura. He wanted to stop Lin Xiao's further actions. The power that Lin Xiao had grasped was too terrifying. In a short period of time, he was about to refine the ancient god of Universe 6 and turn him into nourishment to nourish Lin Xiao. At this time, the ancient gods of the other universes had strange expressions on their faces. It was originally a life and death battle between Lin Xiao and the ancient god of Universe 6. But now, the ancient god of Universe 7 didn't care about morality and actually wanted to take advantage of Lin Xiao's victory and was about to refine the ancient god of Universe 6. Although this was the case, the ancient gods of the other universes didn't say anything. They knew that the master of the ancient god of Universe 7 had returned at this time and was now sitting in the stands of the extraterritorial battlefield. He didn't stop the ancient god of Universe 7 now, presumably because he tacitly approved of this action. But Sui Shui of Universe 5 couldn't stand it anymore. Her master fell into a deep sleep again 1,000 years ago. She was the only one present at the Universe Convention. Now Sui Shui was only at the peak of the ancestor realm, and her cultivation was still far from that of an ancient god. But now she looked directly at Universe 7 and said with a questioning tone, "Aren't the actions of your Universe 7 too contemptible?" These words made the god kings and ancient gods of the other universes look at Sui Shui in a new light. The thieves of the 12 universes have fallen into darkness, and everyone has the right to kill them. My disciple, there is no problem in taking action at this time. You are Luo's disciple. I hope you understand the general trend and don't make a mistake. The ancient god of Universe 7's master only said a few words casually, but in the eyes of the ancient gods of Universe 5, it carried endless pressure. Sui Shui retreated again and again, and a trace of blood couldn't help but overflow from the corner of her mouth. This was the terror of a powerhouse who returned from the Realm Sea. Every word and action carried the power of the Tao Law. Even the other ancient gods on the side were secretly shocked. I'm afraid that the master of Universe 7's ancient god is now at the late stage of the original god realm, and he didn't suffer a big problem like us. In the true sense, he is at the peak of the late stage of the original god realm. The ancient gods of the other universes were secretly shocked. At the same time, they also thought of something. With the return of the ancient god of Universe 7's master, even if the ancient god of Universe 5 had not fallen into a deep sleep, he was not his opponent. The god kings of the 12 universes, in the face of such a powerhouse, would find it difficult to pose the slightest threat. Now, facing Lin Xiao, he just disdained to take action. If it really came to that point, he was afraid that he could kill Lin Xiao with one hand. He now acquiesced to the ancient god of Universe 7 to take action because he wanted to see how far Lin Xiao had reached with the use of dark matter. The huge vines could extract all vitality. They went straight for Lin Xiao. And Lin Xiao didn't seem to have any intention of avoiding the attack of the ancient god of Universe 7. He condensed the power of darkness in his left hand and turned it into 9 ferocious phoenixes. At the same time, black flames curled up and ignited the vines, turning them into charcoal and rustling to the ground. Lin Xiao's other hand didn't give up on refining the ancient god of Universe 6. Only the ancient god of Universe 6 could be heard wailing in pain. He felt the fear of death. But now, there was no other way. Lin Xiao was too decisive and didn't give anyone the slightest chance. Facing the attack of the ancient god of Universe 7, he was still desperate to refine the ancient god of Universe 6. The huge vines were only blocked for a short time by the true phoenix fire condensed by Lin Xiao. Immediately after, new plants grew. They attacked in Lin Xiao's direction with extreme speed. The entire extraterrestrial battlefield was occupied by plants and trees at this time. The ancient gods of Universe 7 were stronger than the ancient gods of Universe 6 in terms of realm and Tao laws. In terms of the degree of difficulty, they were still inferior. Lin Xiao's body was directly penetrated. but the method in his right hand still didn't loosen. He forcibly turned his hand into a demonic blade and completely cut off the plant that pierced his body. Blood flowed out, looking very miserable. Although the people around despised this kind of behavior, no one stepped forward to stop it. Chapter 1268. They just looked at him indifferently. He was seriously injured at this time. Without the complete original God realm, he fought against the ancient gods of two universes. He didn't have the slightest chance to breathe. Every attack of the ancient gods of the seventh universe was a killing move. But Lin Xiao resisted it with difficulty. The extraterritorial battlefield was already dyed red with blood. I've tried my best. Lin Yu had used all his strength to forcibly refine the ancient god of the sixth universe. But he didn't have time to absorb this power, and his body had exploded many times. Su Yishui wanted to come forward and stop the ancient gods of the seventh universe from completely erasing Lin Xiao. I seem to have heard that the godly king of the fifth universe once stayed in the 12th universe for a period of time and had an unclear relationship with the deceased godly king of the 12th universe. I don't know if you are protecting the people of the 12th universe. Because of this, the god king of the 11th universe said with a mocking tone. Su Yishui was so angry that she couldn't speak for a while. What did you say? Su Yishui asked. I'm already the wife of God King Lin. Now that the 12 universes have formed an alliance with the 5th universe, if you insist on destroying the 12 universes, then take the 5th universe with you. Su Yishui said directly at this time. She was a generous person who didn't care about etiquette. Now that she said this sentence, she wanted the universes that were eyeing the 12 universes covetously to reconsider. I don't dare. In the 5th universe, there's a peerless powerhouse at the late stage of the original God realm. But what you said has been recognized by the people of the 12 universes. The God King of the 11th universe obviously knew a lot and asked again at this time. This made Su Yishui's face become ugly, just when Lin Xiao's true spirit was about to be destroyed. Since you have this relationship with the 12 universes, you may have also joined the darkness. After this conference, come with me to the 7th universe and thoroughly baptize you. The ancient god master of the 7th universe had an indifferent look in his eyes, but from his words, he seemed to want Su Yishui. He knew the cultivation methods of the 5th universe. He took a fancy to the supreme power in Su Yishui's body. He had a great use for it and could help his cultivation. Lin Xiao was defeated at this time. His physical body was already broken, and his true spirit was slowly dissipating. A gourd appeared in the hand of the ancient god of Universe 7. Profound runes were intertwined on the gourd, and with a terrifying devouring power, it sucked in Lin Xiao's dissipating divine sense and body bit by bit. Just when everyone thought that the dust had settled, a voice suddenly rang out. Who dares to bully my 12 universes? It was a calm sentence. A tall and straight figure appeared in the extraterritorial battlefield. He was dressed in white and seemed to be standing in an eternal unknown. The time and space Taoist laws spread out from his body, causing everyone present to raise their heads. The person who came was Lin Yu, who had just broken through. At this moment, his expression was extremely cold. There wasn't the slightest bit of emotion in it. The moment he stretched out his finger, the law of time directly imprisoned the ancient god of Universe 7 in place. The gourd in his hand exploded. Lin Yu's true spirit and broken body appeared and came to Lin Yu's side. Lin Yu looked at the miserable Lin Xiao and remained silent. He used the power of the God King's order to reverse time and space and resurrected Lin Xiao. Now that he had mastered the law of time and space, coupled with the supreme power of the God King's order, as long as a person still had a trace of their true spirit left, he could be revived. The aura on Lin Yu's body was incomparably deep, making people unable to see through it and instinctively terrified. Even some of the ancient gods who had entered the original god realm for a long time looked at Lin Yu as if they were facing a supreme venerable. Lin Yu had now condensed 12 layers of his inner world and had already surpassed the taboo. It made these ancient gods who had only condensed one layer of their inner world feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. This kind of feeling was something they had never felt before in their long history. God King Lin Xiu looked at Lin Yu in front of him, and the corners of his mouth raised into a smile. This was the first time since Lin Xiu was born that he had shown joy. Sui Shui was even more stunned in place. Although she hadn't been with Lin Yu for a long time, no one could doubt her feelings for Lin Yu. At this time, Sui Shui was smiling, but the corners of her eyes had unconsciously shed tears. "I'm fine." Lin Yu's tone became gentle. These words were said to Lin Xiu and Sui Shui. He took Lin Xiu and left quietly. The ancient god of the seventh universe retreated without fighting out of instinctive fear. He didn't know the source of this fear. Disciple, he has condensed more than 6 layers of his inner world. You're not his opponent. Retreat. The master of the seventh universe's ancient god slowly said at this time. He had been maintaining indifference, because he firmly believed that with his late-stage original god realm cultivation and without any injuries, he was an absolutely invincible existence in the 12 universes. Even if Lin Yu appeared now, he was still just an early-stage original god realm cultivator to him. Perhaps he could suppress an early-stage original god realm cultivator, but to him, he was still just an ant and not a threat. When the ancient god of the seventh universe heard this, he was slightly surprised and began to retreat quickly. But Lin Yu only pointed a finger. Boom! The entire space was collapsing. The ancient god of the seventh universe was imprisoned. The master of the seventh universe's ancient god also pointed a finger, which was overflowing with brilliance. He wanted to stop Lin Yu. Both of them showed incomparable indifference. However, a frightening scene appeared. The method of the master of the seventh universe's ancient god was instantly disintegrated. The ancient god of the seventh universe was directly obliterated, and he didn't even have the slightest resistance. "Master, save me." When the ancient god of the seventh universe was completely submerged by the laws, he let out a shrill scream. Most of the ancient gods who stayed in the universe were people who cherished their lives. Now, the danger of death made him cry for help. The power of the laws of time and space was dominant, mixed with the laws that Lin Yu obtained from the second and third universe's ancient gods by swallowing the starry sky. Several laws merged into one. The power was terrifying and boundless. The master of the seventh universe's ancient god wanted to attack again, but everything was too late. The ancient god of the seventh universe was directly submerged in it. He was directly killed. The ancient gods of the other universes stood up in shock. The scene in front of them had exceeded their understanding. 2 people were in the same realm. No matter how strong one was in the original god realm, it was impossible to kill in an instant. So much so that one couldn't even make a resistance. Lin Yu didn't care at all about the death of the seventh universe's ancient god. He used the swallowing starry sky again. Under the support of the laws of time and space, he quickly absorbed the laws of the seventh universe's ancient god. He came to the first layer of his inner world and turned it into nourishment. Lin Yu took a step forward and arrived in front of the master of the seventh universe's ancient god. "What did you say to Sui Shui just now?" Lin Yu was facing a late-stage original god realm expert. His expression didn't change at all as he asked indifferently. Sui Shui's beautiful eyes were full of splendor. She knew that Lin Yu was protecting her. After 1,600 years, the aura on Lin Yu's body could no longer be seen through. He was like a god wandering in the world with an indifferent temperament. Chapter 1269. He was the master of the ancient god of Universe 7. Naturally, he would not be outdone. The terrifying auras of the two collided. The spectator stands began to collapse, and the debris spread out in all directions like a raging wave. Everyone could not bear the collision of the two auras and retreated quickly. Sui Shui and Lin Xiu were protected by Lin Yu's aura, so they could barely resist. "You are very amazing," the master of the ancient god of Universe 7 said slowly. "You must be a taboo in the original god realm." At this moment, he could see Lin Yu's current state. As soon as he said this, the other ancient gods of Universe 7 who were retreating in the distance were shocked. They all knew what the word taboo meant. The ninth layer of the inner world had never appeared since ancient times. Especially in the later generations, the Tao of heaven and earth had been destroyed in the battle in ancient history. The Tao of heaven was incomplete. It was already very difficult for the cultivators of the later generations to reach the original God realm, let alone condensing the ninth layer of the inner world. But the master of the ancient God of Universe 7 was definitely not a person who spoke without thinking. Moreover, Lin Yu was only at the early stage of the original God realm. Facing a late-stage original God realm expert, his aura was not inferior at all. It could be inferred that Lin Yu had definitely stepped into the taboo. It was hard to believe that such a person had appeared in front of them. They originally thought that Lin Yu had passed away, but they did not expect that when he returned, he was already so powerful. The neutral universe was rejoicing in their hearts at this moment. Lin Yu's iron-blooded methods were known from the 10th universe to the 2nd and 3rd universes. The result of provoking Lin Yu might be the destruction of the entire universe. My name is Gu Song. You killed my disciple. No matter whether you're a taboo in the original God realm or not, you will pay with your life. The master of the ancient God of Universe 7 stood up and said slowly to Lin Yu, I don't need to know your name. You're just a dead soul. Your disciple is just an ant. As soon as Lin Yu said this caused the expressions of everyone present to become very interesting. Facing an expert who returned from the Realm C, Lin Yu actually dared to say these words. It could be said that he was bold. He didn't say much. Lin Yu teleported Su Yishui and Lin Xiu to a safe place. Before Gu Song could speak, the nomological laws in Lin Yu's hands directly suppressed Gu Song. The 9 layers of the inner world appeared behind Lin Yu. At this moment, he was like the creator of the universe. The 9 worlds were endlessly transmitting power to him. An undying aura was being emitted. The entire extraterritorial battlefield of the first universe shattered and ceased to exist. This was the power that Lin Yu had displayed. The other 3 layers of his universe were dormant after they were formed. Lin Yu did not use them, even though his current cultivation was far lower than Gu Song's. However, in terms of strength, he was not weak at all. At the same time, Lin Yu had already grasped 6 types of nomological laws. Time and space were dominant. To be precise, Lin Yu had grasped 7 types of nomological laws. But the other type, the Tao fruit that existed in his previous life, was now in the 11th layer of the inner world and was difficult to use. Gu Song's black hair danced. A stone sword appeared in his hand, emitting a decaying aura. Do you know that you are now attacking someone who has made great contributions to the 12 universes? There was no emotion in Gu Song's eyes. He didn't know why Gu Song had returned from the Realm C. But Lin Yu didn't want to know. The 2 people's nomological laws collided, causing the entire extraterritorial battlefield to be shrouded in a layer of chaos. The terrifying aura had even spread to the first universe. In the first universe, there were methods left behind by the experts who left in the past to avoid being affected. Lin Yu was now fighting against a late-stage original God Realm expert. As an early-stage original God Realm expert, he wasn't at a disadvantage at all. It was just the first time the 2 of them fought, but it had already caused such a terrifying scene. The Emperor's sword appeared in Lin Yu's hand. The 2 of them changed from a clash of nomological laws to a battle physique. The naked eye could no longer capture Lin Yu and Gu Song's figures. One could only see large collapses in the void, and space-time turbulence appeared. The aura released by the 2 of them was enough to cause the destruction of small worlds. A majestic aura spread out. The moment Gu Song used the stone sword, the power in the void seemed to have been extracted by him. This sword has no name. I brought it back from the land of origin. It's your honor to die under this sword. Gu Song caressed the sword's body. There were many cracks on the sword's body, but it exuded a supreme aura. The stone sword back then might have come from an utmost being. It had already far surpassed the original God realm. Until now, even Gu Song found it difficult to completely control this item. However, when the stone sword appeared, it almost drained a part of the universe. The stone sword was simple and didn't reveal a trace of brilliance. There weren't any runes or imprints on it either. If it wasn't controlled at this moment, it was no different from an ordinary sword. Lin Yu just watched quietly. An utmost being wasn't something he could go against now. A portion of the power of the God King's order was intertwined in the Emperor's sword. Now that Lin Yu had grasped the time and spaced out laws, he could wield the God King's order like an extension of his arm. Not only that, the aura of the origin ancient word and the clay jar were also attracted by him. They appeared on the Emperor's sword. The Emperor's sword in Lin Yu's hand gradually became hazy and illusory. At this moment, it seemed like it didn't belong to this part of history with him. Even Lin Yu's figure gradually became unrecognizable, grasping the time and space Dao laws at the same time. It seems like you have obtained the legacy of the first-generation God King of the 12 universes. Gutsong returned from the Realm Sea and obviously knew many secrets. Greed appeared in his eyes for the first time, because one of the purposes of his return this time was to find the legacy of the utmost being who was about to take the final step, which was the legacy of the first-generation God King of the 12 universes. Now that Lin Yu's body had revealed that aura, Gutsong couldn't help but reveal a smile. He said, "You appeared here with the legacy of the first-generation God King of your universe. It saves me the trouble of searching for it myself." He didn't threaten Lin Yu to hand it over and spare his life, because in his eyes, Lin Yu was already a dead man. You shouldn't have revived. You're just experiencing another death and increasing the pain. Gutsong said. He waved the ancient sword in his hand in front of him. Unknowingly, a terrifying power was emitted. The other ancient gods of the universe who were extremely far away had withered faces at this moment. At the same time, they coughed out large mouthfuls of blood, as though they had been slashed by something. Even their own Tao fruits showed signs of instability. The power of this stone sword was profound. It could actually penetrate the essence of a person and slash their Tao fruits. It caused them to fall to the bottom of the valley. Furthermore, the Tao fruits that were slashed weren't temporary. They couldn't be repaired or reversed. Lin Yu was fearless. At the same time, he slashed out with his sword, cutting off time and space. The sword light had already arrived in front of Gutsong before he even made his move. Chapter 1270. Everyone was still retreating. At the same time, they were surprised by the power Lin Yu displayed. It had already surpassed their understanding of the early stage of the original God realm. If the 12 godly kings of the universe don't die, we might witness the birth of a paramount. The ancient god of the fourth universe muttered to himself, although he hadn't experienced the era before the ancient history. However, he had once seen an ancient record that said that every paramount had condensed the 9th level of their inner world when they were in the original God realm. Only then could they reach the great Tao and be invincible in the world. However, this was only a possibility. Even the ancient gods of the universe didn't know if what was recorded was true or false. Cut my Tao fruit. Lin Yu was filled with disdain. In Gutsong's hands, there was only a broken paramount weapon. The Tao fruits of his previous life and future life were truly at the paramount level. At the same time, they held the supreme Tao law. Even if the owner of the stone sword came here, it would be difficult for him to destroy his Tao fruit. Lin Yu didn't resist. Instead, he allowed the unknown aura to enter. He entered his inner world. 2 lotus flowers appeared after being refined. Chains intertwined with Tao and truth bound the 2 lotus flowers, preventing them from blooming. An inexplicable sword chi came close to the 2 lotus flowers. You're courting death. The stone sword in Gutsong's hand blocked the sword chi that Lin Yu slashed out. He saw that Lin Yu didn't resist. Instead, he allowed the aura of the stone sword to enter his body. He had already made a decision in his heart. Lin Yu would die without a doubt. However, with the appearance of Lin Yu's Tao fruit, between heaven and earth, the mysterious chanting of sutras sounded. It covered the entire area. However, no one understood the meaning of the sutras. They were all puzzled. However, The chanting of sutras blended with the great Tao, making this place mysterious and unknown. It was as if this place didn't belong to the ancient history. Because of the chanting of sutras, the Tao law of this place was reconstructing and evolving. Under the chanting of sutras, the mysterious sword chi of the stone sword. Clang, a crisp sound rang out. The sound of gold and jade rang out. The aura of the stone sword slashed on Lin Yu's Tao fruit, but it didn't cause any effect. It only left a white mark on the chains above. Lin Yu looked indifferently at Gu Song. His figure disappeared from where he stood. Almost at the same time, the Emperor's sword had already arrived in front of Gu Song. Everything was out of his expectations. Gu Song was surprised. Ever since he had obtained the Emperor's sword, he had never failed. Lin Yu's Emperor's sword was once again infused with the aura of the pot. Gu Song's expression changed slightly. He seemed to have seen the aura of Lin Yu's Emperor's sword. However, he didn't have time. Sung the stone sword chi boom. Chaotic thunderbolts intertwined between the two swords, enveloping the entire shattered battlefield. Come, the extraterrestrial battlefield of the world. But now, in the battle between Lin Yu and Gu Song, it had been completely destroyed. Even the slightest bit of existence had turned into dust. With the two of them as the starting point, the primal chaos lightning spread out in all directions as if it could destroy the world. The two retreated at the same time. In the blink of an eye, Lin Yu passed through space and appeared in front of Gu Song again. The two of them were evenly matched. Neither could do anything to the other. Every time Gu Song used the stone sword, Lin Yu's Tao fruit would be attacked. After an unknown number of times, Lin Yu's future Tao fruit turned into a golden lotus. The chains intertwined with Tao and truth actually had a gap. Although it was only one of the countless chains, it was intertwined with mysteries. Even the supreme weapons of the world couldn't damage it. Lin Yu couldn't help but be interested in the stone sword in Gu Song's hand. Gu Song's heart was filled with doubt. He knew the power of the ancient sword. It was definitely an important weapon that belonged to the Supreme. Even if it was damaged, it shouldn't be something an early original God Realm cultivator could resist. It's just an early original God Realm cultivator's Tao fruit. Why is it so tough? Gu Song was puzzled. This was a situation he had never encountered in the land of origin. Now, Lin Yu's future Tao fruit had almost fully manifested. It emitted a terrifying aura. Every time they clashed, the stone sword in Gu Song's hand would slash at Lin Yu's Tao fruit. The gap on the first chain grew bigger and bigger. The power of Lin Yu's future Tao fruit began to merge into Lin Yu's body. It made his battle strength even more terrifying. Gradually, Gu Song started to lose. Everyone watched from afar. They saw this scene. The God King of the 12 universes seems to be increasing in power. Someone saw that Lin Yu had begun to suppress Gu Song. He couldn't help but say in surprise, could it be that he hasn't used his full strength before? It shouldn't be. His battle strength is increasing in the battle. Someone saw through the clues. The stone sword in Gu Song's hand has a mysterious power. After a long time, Lin Yu's cultivation hasn't been severed. Instead, it has increased. What's going on? Someone was puzzled. They stood in the distance and were all affected by the stone sword's aura. They felt that some of their Tao fruits had been taken away. Lin Yu was the closest, and he was in an intense battle with Gu Song. It was unbelievable that such a situation would occur. Could be what Gu Song said just now. Lin Yu obtained the relic of the 12 universes' first God King and can resist the power of the stone sword. Everyone could only think of this possibility. But in reality, it wasn't what they thought. After a few more strikes, Gu Song was completely suppressed. He could only resist passively. You are using the power of the stone sword to help your Tao fruit unseal. Who are you? Gu Song realized. He looked at the Tao fruit in Lin Yu's body. It seemed to be imprisoned by something. The golden lotus was his Tao fruit, and there was more than one. During the battle, 2 golden lotuses had already manifested. Bong! Under the final strike. The first chain on Lin Yu's future Tao fruit was completely broken. Endless comprehension of the space-time Tao law appeared in Lin Yu's body. At the same time, his cultivation rose steadily, and finally stopped at the peak of the early original God realm, although he still hadn't broken through. But Lin Yu's future Tao fruit was already at the highest level. Even if it was a wisp of aura that entered Lin Yu's body, it would be terrifying. "You finally realized," Lin Yu said slowly. But the attack in his hand didn't stop. With a swing of the sword, the space-time Tao law turned into a sword light and attacked Gutsong. Now, Gutsong was in a dilemma. If he continued to use the stone sword, it would only help Lin Yu's Tao fruit unseal. But if he didn't use the stone sword, the Emperor sword in Lin Yu's hand had fused several auras and was incomparably terrifying. Even with the power of the late original God realm, it was difficult for him to resist. There was almost no way out. Puff! A bloody mark appeared on Gutsong's waist. His body split into two and then exploded. In an instant, his flesh and blood reversed, and Gutsong quickly reformed his body. Chapter 1271. The current Gutsong was already speechless. However, just as his figure was condensed, Lin Yu's attack arrived again in the blink of an eye. The Emperor's sword in Lin Yu's hand gradually changed. Even the surrounding area had black and white particles appearing. This was the materialization of the space-time Tao law. The space and time here were infinitely compressed. There was a collapse. As Lin Yu waved his sword, with his figure as the starting point, the black and white particles formed a circle and were about to explode. This was a divine ability that Lin Yu had comprehended based on the space-time superposition ability in the God King token. It suppressed space-time infinitely. An area formed a particle. Endless power wreaked havoc in the area. This was a large-scale killing with no blind spots. It was difficult to hide in the sky or earth. Gutsong had no choice but to take out the stone sword again. All the auras here were blinded. Everyone was extremely far away and couldn't see what was happening clearly. They saw that the area where they were standing began to appear strange red lightning. The chaos lightning tribulation caused by the creation of a technique. Someone recognized the origin of the lightning tribulation. Lin Yu has created a supreme divine ability. Lin Yu murmured. Everyone couldn't help but gasp. They all felt a chill down their spines. For a moment, they were speechless. The power of the particles contained the power of time and affected the world where everyone was. Everything was returning to nothingness. Everything no longer existed. Everyone was horrified and immediately retreated. Gutsong's figure was shattered again. Black mist gradually spread out from his flesh and blood, enveloping the place. A strange aura appeared. Gutsong's figure condensed from it. The chaos, heavenly tribulation also began to dissipate under the spread of the strange aura. You have indeed been contaminated by the strange. You must have returned this time to complete some things that the strange race has instructed you to do, right? When Lin Yu came, he noticed that there was a strange movement in the clay pot. At this moment, Gutsong's figure was destroyed twice before revealing his true body. You forced me to do this. Originally, I wanted to hide in the 12 universes and disturb the rear of that group. Gutsong had already turned into an indescribable monster. Just a glance at him was enough to send chills down one's spine. He looked at Lin Yu with a cold and bloodthirsty gaze and continued. Your appearance has exceeded my expectations. However, being able to kill someone who has condensed the 9th level of his inner world and resolve any hidden dangers that may arise in the future makes this trip worthwhile. Gutsong no longer hid. Everyone felt their hair stand on end. The strange aura caused their cultivation to stagnate. Gutsong had reached the peak of original God realm without hiding his real power. An intimidating aura emanated from his body. He put away the stone sword and stabbed it into his head. However, the stone sword did not cause any harm to him. There had always been a wound on his head. It was as though the utmost being of the past had used this sword to slay him. If he had truly died in the hands of an utmost being, then the strength of the sinister being that possessed Gutsong back then must have been unimaginable. The endless strange aura began to erode the first universe. The sinister being killed is just borrowing a body to be reborn. It's nothing. Lin Yu kept the Emperor's sword. As his realm increased, his control over the clay jar also deepened. He used the clay jar's power to restrain the sinister aura. It prevented the sinister aura from invading the first universe. Lin Yu stood in the midst of the sinister aura. He was like a speck of light, unremarkable. A pair of wings appeared behind Gu Tsang's back. His hair was sparse, and his mouth grew where his eyes should be. His gray skin spoke of the sinister aura. When the crowd saw this, fear appeared on their faces. So, Gu Tsang has already been infected by the sinister aura. No wonder he returned from the World Sea. Everyone came to a realization. 9 ancient words appeared beside Lin Yu. After breaking through to the original God realm, Lin Yu had completely grasped the 4 ancient words after 1,500 years in the River of Time. The clay jar emitted an ancient radiance. It illuminated the area. At the same time, the sinister aura was dispelled. As expected, this item has appeared. Gu Tsang said, "This item shouldn't appear in the world again." This time, Gu Tsang came prepared. A rotten piece of paper rushed out of his head. Only half of it was left. The words on it appeared in the void. They began to suppress the clay jar. At this moment, Lin Yu could feel the clay jar's power weakening. This was the first time such a situation occurred when facing the sinister aura. The words that appeared on the rotten piece of paper began to speak. It was grand and sinister. The illusory image of the Yellow Springs underworld seemed to have appeared in the world. There were countless indescribable monsters. They were all supreme experts. At this moment, they spoke together as if they were chanting scriptures. They were chanting the words on the paper. The moment it appeared, it seemed to make people sink into it and sink into oblivion. However, there was also a kind of solemnity. It seemed to be some kind of memorial. However, with Lin Yu's realm, it was hard for him to understand the meaning. The gray words started to compete with the origin ancient words that Lin Yu grasped. The light of the clay jar also began to dim. They had some kind of connection. At the moment when something similar to the memorial appeared, the clay jar and the origin ancient words were both restricted. It infinitely weakened Lin Yu's power. "I'll kill you first, then take the clay jar away. Although I can't complete that matter, it's enough," Gu Tsang said slowly. His tone was calm and unhurried. However, Lin Yu didn't give up. He began to take out the clay jar with all his might. It allowed him to break free from the imprisonment of the memorial. "Since that's the case, I'll kill you first." Lin Yu was still as calm as ever. He regained control of the clay jar's power. But now, he couldn't care less about the first universe. The sinister aura began to invade. Soon, the first universe would be destroyed. This was an irreversible result. The first universe might be eroded by the sinister aura that the utmost being killed back then and become a land of death. At this moment, Lin Yu teleported an origin ancient word to the bottom of the first universe and entered the Realm Sea. "Are you still thinking of sending a message to them in the Realm Sea?" Gu Tsang said with disdain. "They don't have time to care about anything else. Otherwise, why haven't they returned?" Gu Tsang came from the origin ancient lands and knew the situation of the predecessors. It was just that he didn't know if what he said was true or false. However, that wasn't Lin Yu's goal. The origin ancient word arrived above the Realm Sea. It was reflected on an old monk sitting on the Realm Sea. It was Taoist Jie-in who only had a wisp of his will left. The old monk opened his empty, pupilless eyes. The Dharma on his body was vast and mighty. It was injected into the first universe, temporarily protecting it from the corrosion of the sinister aura. Chapter 1272. Lin Yu was now short of the ancient word. The corrosion of the strange substance on him was a little closer. In the outside world, Lin Yu was almost completely devoured by the strange substance. The clay jar's power could only protect him. Like a speck of dust, it was difficult to release light. In the dim space, Lin Yu closed his eyes and held the Emperor's sword horizontally in front of him. His slender figure was like an ancient well without ripples. The surrounding particles gathered once again. "Want to use your divine ability to resist me? Do you really think that you are supreme?" Gu Tsang laughed sinisterly. But Lin Yu ignored him. This technique can sever time, can obliterate divine abilities, can make everything return to nothingness. I'll call you solitary. Lin Yu suddenly opened his eyes, only to see the power of the divine king order start to emit. The power of time and space superposition appeared. 100-fold increase in power. Lin Yu's self-created divine ability, solitary, emitted a terrifying power. In an instant, the strange matter in the surroundings was dispersed. Then, with an unstoppable momentum, it started to sweep in all directions. The strange substance started to vanish under Lin Yu's divine ability. Just SOSO. Although Gutsong was surprised by the degree of this power's terror. However, the level of Lin Yu's Dao Law comprehension was too low. It was far from reaching the supreme level. The divine ability, solitary, started to gradually disappear under Gutsong's palm. Boom! But right at this moment, Lin Yu shouted, "Second stage," only to see the power of the divine ability that should have disappeared skyrocket by who knows how many times again. This was beyond Gu Song's expectations. Lin Yu had broken the shackles of the future Dao fruit just now. The power fused with him and already possessed a trace of supreme aura. Now, above the divine ability solitary, it was really shrouded in this aura. Under the divine king order's time and space superposition, it was already infinitely magnified at this time. Impossible. Why is there a supreme aura on your body? Gutsong was shocked. The power of the divine ability, solitary, carried a supreme aura. Let everyone outside clearly sense it. Sui Shui and Lin Xiu looked worried. Eerie represented the end of the world. They all knew what it meant, especially Lin Xiu, who used this power to cultivate. At this moment, he understood very well how terrifying the strange thing that appeared was. Although he was just at the late original God realm, his profound understanding of principles was far beyond that. I understand now. This is your future Dao fruit. 3 lives. How is this possible? Gutsong's expression changed for the first time. I've seen you before. Gutsong looked at Lin Yu. He seemed to have recalled something. In the past, he was severely injured by an utmost being before dying under this stone sword. As for that mysterious utmost being, he had always been at the back, and no one knew where he came from. Now, he could tell from Lin Yu's aura. That utmost being that he had severely injured back then seemed to be extremely similar to Lin Yu. Speaking of the aura he was exuding right now, there was no difference at all. 3 lives. This made Gutsong think of a saying. He wanted to send a message. However, the divine ability, solitary, had already arrived in front of him. An unparalleled power killed him directly. The clay jar appeared and absorbed Gutsong's broken body into it. At the same time, Lin Yu's other 3 layers of inner world suppressed the mouth of the clay jar and sealed the 9 ancient words. Not just 9 layers of inner worlds, but 12 layers. Gutsong forcefully condensed his body. At this moment, he was in the clay jar. He wanted to break free, but it was already impossible. Gutsong was incomparably shocked. Their eerie race did not have a cultivation system, but he understood that in the 12 universes and the 10 great sacred grounds, after reaching the original God realm, living beings could condense their inner worlds. The highest was 9 layers. However, Lin Yu's appearance changed his perception of the world. The 12 layers of inner worlds made him instinctively fearful. He seemed to have thought of something. However, Lin Yu did not give him the chance. He did not want to delay any longer. Lin Yu activated the clay jar and began to activate the power within, refining Gutsong with all his might. The paper in the outside world was no longer controlled by Gutsong. As the eerie substance dissipated, it began to burn and black flames rose. Just as it was about to dissipate from heaven and earth, a power hidden in the paper penetrated through space and directly arrived at the place where everyone was hiding. The endless distance only lasted for an instant. That aura stared at Lin Xiu and directly entered his mind. His eyes gradually became heartless and indifferent to all living beings. At the same time, an evil power gradually appeared on his face. You want to kill me? Wishful thinking. Lin Xiu's voice became ancient. Before he could laugh wantonly, Lin Yu's origin ancient word and realm C suddenly disappeared. It directly suppressed Lin Xiu, who was currently being controlled. An origin ancient word appeared on Lin Xiu's forehead. It turned into a divine inscription and temporarily suppressed the eerie substance in Gutsong's body. But this was only for a short period of time. An origin ancient word was not enough to completely destroy it. It could only have a temporary restraining effect. Lin Xiu sat cross-legged on the ground. Although his expression was calm, no one knew what kind of pain he was enduring. Lin Yu used all his strength. After refining the eerie substance and Gutsong's body in the clay jar, he appeared beside Lin Xiu. At this moment, the ancient gods of the various universes all took the initiative to retreat. Lin Yu guarded Lin Xiu's side. Until half a year passed, the other three ancient words surrounded Lin Xiu. In the end, the origin ancient word on his forehead seemed to be infected. Half of it turned jet black. "God King, keep me in that artifact," Lin Xiu said at this moment. The artifact Lin Xiu was referring to was naturally the clay jar. Lin Yu nodded and didn't hesitate at all. He directly kept Lin Xiu in the clay jar. "If I get lost, refine me directly. Don't show mercy," Lin Xiu said before entering. Although in the clay jar, the eerie substance would be weakened infinitely. However, this sinister living being back then had to go through two utmost beings before it could be killed. It didn't even die and revived in the current world. It came to the universe. But now, the eerie substance existed in Lin Xiu's body. If he wanted to completely remove it and keep Lin Xiu's life, it was completely impossible. Once the eerie substance attached to the body, it would be like a maggot in the bone, fusing with the host and finally occupying the body completely. Everything now could only depend on Lin Xiu's luck. But at this moment, it was almost equivalent to death. Lin Xiu needed to spend a long time to cross it himself. If Lin Xiu succeeded and used the clay jar to complete the transformation, his future achievements would definitely be limitless. It might even play a crucial role in the future Black Calamity. After settling everything, Lin Yu made a trip to the first universe. Demon Ancestor and the rest came out personally to welcome him. The current Lin Yu was already at the top of the 12 universes. Probably even if the ancient gods in the first universe woke up, they wouldn't be Lin Yu's match. An early-stage original god killing a late-stage original god would definitely be recorded in the annals of history and spread throughout the long history. However, this was only one of the 12 universes. There was an extremely small number of children here, and all of them had the best aptitudes. Lin Yu entered the main hall under the welcoming of Qin Wunyan and the rest. The children followed him all the way. Not long after, they had entered Heaven City. At this moment, Lin Yu, as the divine king of a world, had been cultivating. He thought that it was time to do something substantial for the overall realm of the 12 universes. Lin Yu came to the square. Are these children the most talented? Lin Yu looked at the children. At this moment, he saw Lin Yu mention the children. The elders of the children were all excited, and their bodies were trembling. "Yes," Qin Wunyan said. "In that case, I will pass on some Dao techniques to the children of this era to establish their foundation," Lin Yu said slowly. They came to the square of Heaven City. "Thank you, Divine King Lin. Thank you, Divine King Lin." Lin Yu was even tall and straight. At this moment, he stood in the distance as if he had transcended the world and did not belong to the ancient history. In the eyes of the people of the 12 universes, Lin Yu was already an unknown existence. It seemed that as long as Lin Yu existed, there would be no threat to the 12 universes. Qin Wunyan and the others were puzzled at this moment. They couldn't help but ask Su Yishui, where did Lin Xiu go? They didn't see Lin Xiu, and they couldn't help but have a bad premonition in their hearts. Could it be that Divine King Lin didn't arrive in time, and Lin Xiu had died in the Battle of the Convention? They all knew that Lin Xiu went with his coffin this time, and he was determined to die. And Lin Xiu once followed Lin Yu by his side, and was created in the mold of Lin Yu, inheriting part of Lin Yu's personality. He would not admit defeat in the slightest at the convention. Maybe his words were too radical, and in the end, he died in the convention. It was not impossible for his body and soul to be destroyed. Lin Xiao is now infected by something strange and is transforming in Divine King Lin's artifact, Su Yixue explained. She followed Lin Yu to the 12 universes. After such a long separation, she temporarily gave up the affairs of the 5th universe and wanted to stay by Lin Yu's side for a little while. Goddess Yuqing and the others naturally knew of Su Yixue's feelings for Lin Yu. To be able to guard Lin Yu's coffin for 1,000 years proved that she was worth it. Now, at the first moment when Lin Yu recovered, regardless of the convention situation, he still came to the 12 universes. At this time, these children were all kneeling on the square. Since you want to impart, you should teach without discrimination. In the entire 12 universes, gather the children of this stage in an open space. Lin Yu's voice contained cultivation, and at this time, it spread throughout the 12 universes. His voice was like a great bell, shaking the hearts of every living being. Divine King Lin wants to impart. Divine King Lin is resurrected. Some people were surprised, and at the same time, they reacted. They immediately gathered the children in a region and came to an open space between heaven and earth. Even mortals had a chance. But obviously, some sects only cared about their own interests. Some children from poor families. At this time, they could only look forward to it. Dressed in rags, they climbed to a higher mountain call, hoping to receive Divine King Lin's teachings. The entire 12 universes had experienced Lin Yu's rule for so many years. Most of them grew up from the legends of Lin Yu. Regardless of wealth or status, Lin Yu's divine consciousness now spread throughout the 12 universes. He stood on the square of Sky City, his posture tall and straight. Lin Yu did not care about the children here. No matter how talented they were, he insisted on teaching without discrimination. The magnificent voice was like the sound of the bell of the great Tao, surrounding the entire 12 universes. This was a scripture for the baptism of children. For Lin Yu, who now mastered the Tao law, it was not difficult to do this. All the children were going through the baptism. Now, whether it was the children or the adults, at this time, their faces were incomparably excited. This included some old monsters of the sects who had personally experienced the era of Lin Yu's rise. At this time, their eyes were shining again. They knew that after this baptism, the achievements of this session of the 12 universes would be limitless. There might not be any other era that could be compared to it. Now, not only was the 12 universes abundant in glory, chi, and resources, but now, with Lin Yu's baptism, they would definitely soar. They were unstoppable. Chapter 1274. Everyone was filled with gratitude as they praised godly King Lin's title. The name of Lin Yu, also known as Divine King Lin, would be passed down in the 12 universes. 3 days passed like this. Even the youths on the call benefited a lot and gradually became clear about the path of cultivation. The path of cultivation was no longer in the hands of a few people. Now, in the 12 universes, everyone had the opportunity to step into cultivation. It was no longer limited to the forces of sex or families. Everyone has food to eat. Everyone has merit to cultivate. Qin Wunyan smiled. He represented Lin Yu and was in charge of the 12 universes for many years. Many white hair had already grown on his temples. 3 days later, Lin Yu was not in a hurry to leave and pursue a higher realm. Instead, he gathered all his old friends in one place. They went to the Hongming continent together. The 12 universes were incomparably peaceful now, and Qin Wunyan also put down his affairs. The current Lin Yu, after breaking through to the original God realm, saw everyone's efforts for the 12 universes. In the end, it was all for him. He was also touched in his heart, especially the current Lin Xiao, who had not woken up yet. The heaven domain has been damaged for an unknown period of time in the battle with the six-winged Divine King. Why don't we take action and rebuild the heaven domain and wait for Lin Xiao to recover? Lin Yuan suggested at this time. Back then, He had a very good relationship with Lin Yu and Lin Xiu, as if they were biological brothers. At this moment, seeing Lin Xiu fall into such a situation in order to resist the strength of the other universes, he did not feel very good. Because he was in seclusion, he did not even participate in the battle against the six-winged divine king, which made him inevitably feel guilty. On the other hand, Lin Xiu carried the infamy and hibernated beside the six-winged divine king, playing a key role. This was good too. The 12 universes were developing well now. The population in the 3 realms and 5 regions was also extremely prosperous. It was not impossible to restore the heaven domain, which occupied the widest and was once the most prosperous. The heaven domain was the highest of the 3 realms and 5 regions, and the Tao laws there were the most abundant. But after experiencing the battle between the six-winged divine king and the invasion of the 10th universe, it had been completely destroyed. It was not that Lin Yu did not think of restoring it before. However, how vast was the heaven domain? With his ancestor realm cultivation, it was completely impossible for him to do so. After he had broken through to the original God realm, he had the power to create a world. At the same time, he had mastered many Tao laws. It was no longer impossible to repair the heaven domain. Everyone arrived at the place where the heaven region used to be. There were scattered continents floating here. However, to the heaven domain of the past, it was not even a grain of sand. Lin Yu and the others arrived at a slightly larger area. It was unknown when, but there were already plants growing here, but they were very sparse, very barren. After the great battle against the 10th universe, the celestial domain was filled with void torrents. So Qin Wunyan and the others had never set foot here. Lin Yu didn't pay much attention to his return. Now, to their surprise, the bits of land left behind by the heaven realm were actually showing signs of returning to one. In the largest area, the Tao laws had already been perfected. Lin Yu looked over. There were living beings among them. During the great battle in the heaven domain, all the living beings should have died because they couldn't bear the power. But now, there were living beings in the combined land. The Tao laws here were not perfect. In comparison, the environment on Earth that Lin Yu had been to was better than here. Lin Yu and the others discovered that there were living beings in a larger land. With a thought, Lin Yu and the others arrived on this land. However, they didn't expose themselves in advance, because they all wanted to see the origin of these living beings. If living beings were born in less than 10,000 years, it would be too terrifying. This kind of living being was nurtured by heaven and earth and had an innate advantage. However, the great sun, immeasurable Buddha, quickly saw that these were not living beings nurtured by heaven and earth. Their clothes were very strange. However, they were also very simple. Among them, the upper echelons were only wearing the armors of some of the living beings that died in the great battle. However, because of the great battle, the divinity on the armors had disappeared, leaving only a few drops. Their lives were very difficult. Oftentimes, there would be newborn children who would die of starvation. These were all humans. They seemed to be still in the primitive era, living a life of eating raw meat and drinking blood. However, the land here was too barren. Animals and plants were scarce to an extent. There was only one tribe here, and there were only 34 people in it. But even so, it was difficult to feed them. One of them held a wooden staff and danced a strange dance, as if he was sacrificing something. Their language was also different from the 11th universe. They were babbling, and no one knew what they were saying. Lin Yu and the others could sense it through the fluctuations of their divine sense. They also roughly understood. These humans were only sacrificing to an existence they called the God of Destruction. God King Lin, when did you become the God of Destruction? Su Ishue teased. Her realm was now at the peak of the ancestor realm. He could obtain useful information from the sea of consciousness of these ordinary human beings in secret. Although these humans had already forgotten about the existence of the God of Destruction in their minds, the God of Destruction's existence was still a mystery to them. But through piecing and combining, Su Ishue obtained useful information. the existence that those people were sacrificing to his Lin Yu. Perhaps the battle strength that God King Lin displayed was too terrifying and had an indelible impact on them. The great sun, boundless Buddha, analyzed. They are the bloodline left behind in the 10th universe. Lin Yu looked at the 34 people and said slowly. It was unknown how their ancestors had managed to survive back then, and how they had managed to give birth to their descendants over the years. However, Lin Yu did not intend to destroy these people. At his realm, the ancestral land of those people had already been occupied, and now they could only live in such a barren land. Let them go. They are very pitiful. The mistakes made by the ancestors should not be borne by the juniors. Qin Yi's eyes were filled with pity. Lin Yu nodded. However, there was still a faint, strange aura in the bodies of these people. This originated from the origin. They seemed to have merged with the strange aura and could not be distinguished from each other. However, it was peaceful. They still had the consciousness of humans and did not seem to be affected by the strange substance. I see. Lin Yu looked at the altar where the people were sacrificing at this time. There were still signs of life. There were a total of 2. They were the people left behind when the 10th universe invaded the 12th universe. However, there was a mysterious aura on their bodies that seemed to be able to conceal all auras from detection. Even the great sun, boundless Buddha, Su Yishui, and the others did not find any clues. However, the pottery jar in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness reacted. There were fragments of the pottery jar on the 2 people's bodies. This made Lin Yu a little surprised. Chapter 1275. Everyone came to the tribe. The humans in the tribe were all surprised, babbling and dancing with joy. Looking at Lin Yu and the others descending from the sky, it was as if they had witnessed a great miracle. From their babbling, what they were trying to express was, God really appeared and came to save us. My God, the power of sacrifice. They didn't have the slightest cultivation and were just ordinary people. Even some of them were weak and malnourished since they were young. After they saw Lin Yu and the others, there were people in the tribe who were covered in tree bark and were already terminally ill. They rolled down from the stone, knelt on the ground, and kept worshiping. Qin Yi couldn't bear it and came to the front of that person. Her hands were overflowing with radiance, slowly healing the injuries on his body. Not long after, that person was already alive and kicking. That person came to Qin Yi's side and babbled to express his gratitude. At the same time, a few people were helped out of the room and brought to Qin Yi's side. At the same time, they kept worshiping similar to female immortal. Save them too. Because of the lack of food and the harsh environment, most people here couldn't live past 40 years old. The priest standing on the altar had a little cultivation, but he was only 50 years old and already looked very old. At this time, a child came to the front of the Yuqing divine maiden, with a pitiful look in his eyes. He was as thin as a match, and at this time, he pointed to a stone house. His meaning was probably to save his mother. He was so weak that he ran into the house, but he couldn't help his mother up. Sister Yuqing, let's go together. Qin Yi came over and pulled the Yuqing divine maiden. She said with a smile. After getting along for so long, the two had a very good relationship. They could be considered to be Lin Yu's wives in the truest sense, the divine empress. Several people looked at them and didn't stop them. With Lin Yu's current realm, no danger in the 12 universes could threaten them. Su Yishui was helpless on the side. Qin Yi paused and came to Su Yishui's side. Divine King Su, you should join us as well. As she spoke, she pulled Su Shenwang along. After Su Yishui was slightly startled, she did not put on the airs of a divine king. Together with Qin Yi, she went to the tribe to treat those who were terminally ill and were about to lose their lives. At this moment, the priest seemed to recognize Lin Yu's appearance. He immediately knelt down. He broke out in a cold sweat because he realized that Lin Yu looked very similar to the god of destruction in the ancient legends. Could it be that the god of destruction has really been summoned by me? He could not stop worshipping, but he was muttering in his heart, I am the god of destruction you speak of. Lin Yu's voice rang out in the priest's mind. God of destruction. The priest kowtowed repeatedly. However, Lin Yu ignored the priest. Instead, he turned to look at the altar and slowly said, "Since you're not dead, why don't you come out?" Boom! The altar directly shattered. Endless essence chi surged within. Two figures, a man and a woman, slowly appeared. The Creator. The priest on the side felt his mouth dry up. He did not know who to worship now. They lived on barren land, and after thousands of years of evolution, they worshiped power. Therefore, the god of destruction, who was Lin Yu, became the object of worship, hoping to obtain the power to live on this land. Now, the creator of the tribe had also appeared. He could not help but feel fear in his heart. According to legend, their tribe was once extremely powerful, but because of the appearance of the god of destruction, it was destroyed. In the end, only the creator and the creator survived. Sigh, this day has finally come. After a sigh, the figures of a man and a woman completely condensed. The man was handsome with a sharp face, and the woman was gentle and beautiful with purple hair draped over her shoulders. After so many years of dormancy, they had broken through to the Saint Realm. Obviously, when they invaded the 12 universes, their status was not low. At this time, the man and woman had already arrived in front of Lin Yu, their faces calm. They had long foreseen this day. It was the 10th universe's fault, and we should pay the price. The man's face was calm as he spoke slowly. Lin Yu's powerful divine consciousness directly locked onto the two. With Lin Yu's divine consciousness in the original God realm, almost all the important things in their lives were known to Lin Yu. In the battle to invade the 12 universes, you did not take action. Lin Yu already knew from the two's divine consciousness. Because the two had the fragments of the pottery jar, they were not completely infected by the strange matter, so they retained a trace of their own consciousness. Later, when they invaded the 12 universes, they hid here. Until the end of the war, they did not leave. For a long time, the two had been collecting fragments of the celestial domain. It seemed that they were atoning for the mistakes of the 10th universe. With their strength, they were far from the strength to rebuild the celestial domain, so they could only simply collect the fragments. After thousands of years, they were affected by the strange matter and fought against the power of the pottery jar, so they had been sleeping until now. You can live in the 12 universes, Lin Yu said indifferently. These two people's hearts were not bad. Lin Yu was not a person who killed innocent people. He intended to let them go. You won't kill us? The two obviously showed surprise. Now that they had the fragments of the pottery jar, their divine consciousness was far stronger than the ordinary Saint Realm experts. Chapter 1276. He believed that with Lin Yu's current realm, he might be able to solve this matter. What happened in Universe 10 back then? Lin Yu asked. From the fact that Lin Xiao could break through to the original God realm with the help of the strange power in Universe 10, he had already guessed some clues. The strangeness of Universe 10 didn't seem to be that simple. In fact, millions of years ago, there were ancestors in Universe 10 who returned from the Realm C. This was also the beginning of Universe 10's fall into darkness. The man said slowly, "If it weren't for a chance encounter, the two of us might have been completely eroded." The man didn't hold back in the slightest. At this moment, he took out the fragments of the pottery jar. At this moment, the fragments of the pottery jar trembled slightly. It directly broke away from the man's hand, emitting an ancient earthy yellow aura that shone on Lin Yu's body. In Lin Yu's sea of consciousness, the broken pottery jar also appeared. It turns out that Divine King Lin actually has such a large part of this thing. The man was obviously surprised. The fragments of the pottery jar held by the two men were only the size of a fingernail and could resist the strange erosion back then. Now, that Lin Yu held the part of the pottery jar, it might really be able to suppress the strangeness of Universe 10. Lin Yu absorbed the fragments of the pottery jar into his sea of consciousness. "I can promise you one thing," Lin Yu said indifferently. This was what the two of them had, and Lin Yu didn't take it for nothing. As soon as these words came out, the two of them fell into hesitation. Are you thinking of completely solving the strangeness of Universe 10? Lin Yu asked. Both of them were born in Universe 10 and had deep feelings for it. When they were young, they left their hometown and went on expeditions to other universes. Now, nearly 10,000 years had passed. How could they not miss their hometown? Can I? Tears flowed down the woman's face. She thought of her hometown all the time. Even if they knew that the current Universe 10 was no longer the same, but the people had changed. It had been eroded by a strange force and was no longer the same. At the same time, they also knew that Lin Yu was already in charge of Universe 10. They immediately said, "Godly King Lin, don't misunderstand. We don't want to be the master of the 10th universe." The way the two of them saw it, even if a fragment of a jar the size of fingernail could fight against the Eerie, it wouldn't be of much use to them. Even when they made this request, their hearts were filled with apprehension. "I can promise you," Lin Yu said slowly. Only the higher Lin Yu's cultivation level was, the more he knew how terrifying a piece of pottery jar was. Perhaps it was an existence that had already surpassed the level of a paragon. It would play a crucial role in the black calamity that would follow. The clay jar had played a huge role in suppressing the strange creatures these few times. It could completely wipe out the immortal and indestructible strange race. Just this alone was enough to cause even the eyes of the utmost beings to turn red with envy. Hearing Lin Yu agree, the two of them were overjoyed. "Thank you, God King Lin." The two of them knelt on the ground. The 10th universe carried too many of their memories. Also, the fragment that we have was found in the 10th universe. When the time comes, I can bring God King Lin to the location where it was found. The man said. He knew that the reason why Lin Yu agreed to their request was because of the fragment of the jar. One could tell that Lin Yu valued the fragment of the jar a lot. Now, he didn't hold back and said directly. Lin Yu nodded his head. Qin Munyan stepped forward and said, "You guys can bring your descendants to the Heaven City first. Right now, we're going to repair the Heaven City." Following that, Qin Munyan took out a token and handed it to the two of them. However, Qin Munyan's words had the two of them startled. Repair the Heaven City. They knew how vast the Heaven City was. It was once the most vast world among the 12 universes. The territory was endless. And now, the 12 universes were thinking of repairing it. They thought of a possibility. Lin Yu had already broken through to that realm. That was the realm that carried the Eerie race ancestor back then. Original God realm. The man looked at Lin Yu and couldn't help but be shocked. In less than 10,000 years, Lin Yu had advanced by a whole realm. It was really frightening. This kind of cultivation speed was probably something that only a few people could achieve since the ancient times. After expressing their deep gratitude, the two of them took the token and left the Heaven City with their descendants. They went to the Heaven City and stayed there temporarily. After arriving at the Heaven City, the two of them didn't hide their identities. Instead, they brought their descendants to the cemetery of the heroes in the Heaven City and spent 3 whole days mourning. That year, they were invaders. They schemed for millions of years and indirectly caused the death of the old God King. These evil deeds were too numerous to be recorded. The people of the 12 universes had always kept this history in their hearts. However, they saw that the two of them were sincere. Their attitude towards the two of them was much better, and they allowed them to stay in the Heaven City temporarily. In the Heaven City, Lin Yu didn't find the aura of other creatures under the coverage of his divine consciousness. Everyone was standing behind Lin Yu. Rebuilding a realm required an endless amount of power. Now, they could witness it with their own eyes. Platycodon grandiflorum and the others were all excited. Although their realms had improved by leaps and bounds, they weren't very high. She looked at Lin Yu's back and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. She had once fought side by side with Lin Yu, but now she could only watch from afar. Platycodon grandiflorum was also a demon empress. Now, she looked at Lin Yu's direction, but she only sighed in her heart. Lin Yu's talent was obvious to all. Platycodon grandiflorum was happy that he could have today's achievements. Everyone stepped back. Lin Yu stretched out his right hand. His inner world opened at the same time. the 9 layers of inner world carried an endless amount of power. The broken heaven domain was being reconstructed by the Tao laws. They turned into divine chains of order and restrained some of the land. As time passed, the original land returned to its original position. With these land as the beginning, a mysterious aura spread. The Tao laws of heaven and earth were first constructed, followed by the birth of real land. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. Destruction was much simpler than creation. The heaven city was reappearing. The land had already appeared. Then mountains, rivers, and plants appeared. One could see water appearing in the once largest river in the heaven city. Not long after, waves surged and flowed endlessly. The dark priest was very emotional. He had lived in the heaven city for the first half of his life and had deep memories. Although it was very depressing, there were still some beautiful memories. Looking at the scenery of the heaven city from the past reappearing, his eyes were also filled with disappointment. In half a year, the heaven city had been rebuilt. Everyone was amazed by this power. Chapter 1277. But what they didn't know was, if Lin Yu hadn't condensed 12 layers of inner worlds, with the strength of an early-stage original god, it was easy to create a world. However, it was impossible to restore such a vast area. Rebuilding the heavenly domain was not easy for Lin Yu and consumed a lot of his energy. Even the first 9 layers of inner worlds were a little dim. The dark divine priest and the others were in charge of the reconstruction of the Qingyun realm. It took him 300 years to get there. Gradually, the heavenly domain bloomed again. The heavenly city was also moved to the center of the heavenly domain. The Divine King Palace was built by the old Divine King. At this time, it was deliberately rebuilt by Lin Yu. Endless glory energy lingered in the heavenly domain. It was far richer than the glory energy of the previous heavenly domain. It turned into a holy land for cultivation in the 12 universes. The 2 men came in front of Lin Yu. He still showed no signs of recovery. Therefore, the great sun boundless Buddha and others temporarily went to other universes. How about 100 years later, the universes that you and I manage will participate in a competition? The Dark Priest and others suggested. The remaining forces in the 6th and 7th universes have been dealt with by Lin Yu. They were handed over to Sky Phoenix and Lin Yuan to take care of. At this time, they all agreed. Sky Phoenix was originally a warlike person and said at this time, "Our competition is not significant. Let the people below host the competition between universes." The few of them met up and decided on this rule as they chatted and laughed. Every 100 years, a grand event would be held. Prepare the things. Archaeosros, Sea God Dragon, and the Dark Priest took care of the 2nd universe together. Although I can't win against you in terms of combat strength, the disciples under me can't say for sure. The first Qilin raised its head proudly at the heavenly phoenix. I don't mind suppressing you for 100 years. Sky Phoenix looked at him disdainfully. Don't be unruly. We agreed that we won't fight. The Archaeosauros said. However, he was the first to step into the space gate. He ignored the Sea God Dragon and the Dark Magister and went to the 2nd universe first. Although they were all godly kings now, they still bickered a lot in private. However, the Archaeosauros were at a disadvantage. After all, the current heavenly phoenix was already at the half-step ancestor realm after the previous closed-door training. The Dark Priest and the others were helpless. Now, Lin Yu had returned. The 6th and 7th universes were successively subdued, and they formed an alliance with the 5th universe. Their sphere of influence was incomparably vast. The other universes fell silent. Regarding Lin Yu's expedition to Universe 6 and Universe 7, they no longer had any objections. Universe 11 stood off to the side, trembling. Although he did not make a move at that time, he did target Lin Xiao. At this time, he had already gone into hibernation. There seemed to be no news from the 11th universe. However, Lin Yu didn't delve into it. He didn't want to pay too much attention to the behavior of the 11th universe. He brought the two men to Universe 10. Lin Yu came to Universe 10 for another purpose. It was to completely solve the hidden dangers in Lin Xiu's body. After hundreds of years, Lin Xiu still showed no signs of recovery. Even with the suppression of the clay pot, the strange creature that possessed Lin Yu was too powerful. Back then, it attracted Lin Yu's previous life and a supreme to personally kill it, but it wasn't killed. In the end, it revived and came to the universe. From a man's words, Lin Yu could vaguely guess. The ancestor of Universe 10 who returned millions of years ago might also be possessed by a supreme, strange creature. However, he suffered from a problem. Otherwise, he wouldn't have driven the entire Universe 10 into darkness and attacked the 12 universes. In the battle before ancient history, Lin Yu's first ancestor might have caused a great shock to the strange race. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to use many methods to invade the 12 universes and find the inheritance left behind by his first ancestor. In Universe 10, it was a desolate place, under the erosion of the strange substance, although Lin Yu had already solved most of it. But the source still existed in the universe. Now that Lin Yu's realm had increased, coupled with the clay pot, he locked onto the location of the source of the strange substance. It was very weak, but it couldn't escape Lin Yu's detection. With a step, he penetrated through space. Lin Yu came to the deepest part of Universe 10. It was a dark area. There was a black dot. It was in an array formed by the cluster of original stars. There was a coffin among them. There were patterns of birds and beasts on it, the scene of a god traveling. Its material was a tough golden divine gold, but the brilliance on it was no longer bright and was enveloped by a black aura. It made the entire area here reveal a strange aura. God coffin. Lin Yu recognized this coffin. There was a supreme aura on it. Even with endless strange substances, it was difficult to completely hide it. This was the coffin that buried the supreme of Universe 10. The dove has taken over the magpie's nest. Lin Yu looked at the god coffin and said coldly, "Back then, the Supreme had made great contributions to the living beings of the universe. But now, after passing away, it was invaded by strange substances. Lin Yu's power of the origin ancient word spread out. At this moment, all the patterns on the coffin began to slowly fuse together, interweaving with Tao and truth. Gradually, it formed an ancient word. At the same time, it was shining brightly with an ancient character that was branded in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness. It seemed that the Supreme Back then had also mastered this ancient word. Now, Lin Yu also found a clue. After the patterns on this coffin fused into an ancient word, the Supreme aura gradually became incomparably blazing. I see. Lin Yu revealed a look of understanding. It turned out that this strange race had invaded the coffin and wanted to use the corpse of the Supreme as its host, but it was sealed inside, so much so that it was difficult to break free. Otherwise, millions of years ago, the 12 universes might have been destroyed. That strange race wouldn't have used the entire Universe 10 to secretly invade the 12 universes. No, a hoarse voice sounded. That strange race's life form, because of Lin Yu's arrival, activated the ancient word on the coffin. It was obvious that this ancient character contained boundless mysteries. It was only at this moment that Lin Yu understood that although he had mastered 4 ancient words, it was only very superficial, and he didn't understand all the mysteries within. The Supreme of Universe 10 only imprinted an ancient word on the god coffin. At this moment, the power that erupted was unparalleled, as if it was looking down on the world. Old man of Universe 10, you tricked me. The strange race's life form in the god coffin shouted at this moment. Your corpse isn't here at all. He was now trapped in the coffin and didn't know what was happening outside. Where's that kid called Lin Xiu? He borrowed my power, but why can't I sense his aura now? This strange race's life form was obviously a little talkative. You won't have the chance to see him anymore. Lin Yu said indifferently. What did you say? The strange race's life form spoke. Chapter 1278. The strange substance's divine sense was suppressed by the god's coffin, and only now did it sense Lin Yu's aura. No, it's the aura of that artifact. He revealed a look of surprise. But Lin Yu didn't give him a chance to continue speaking. The 4 ancient characters that he had mastered were imprinted on the coffin. At the same time, the clay pot emitted an ancient earthy yellow light that suppressed the coffin. The strange creature in the coffin was roaring. But after being suppressed for so long, he had already become one with the coffin. At this moment, there was actually resistance. But this was exactly what Lin Yu wanted to see. Lin Yu used the power of the clay pot, and, as time passed, the aura of the strange creature had become very weak. The power of the ancient characters appeared on Lin Yu's palm. He captured the true spirit of the creature in the coffin in his hand. He used the supreme method. He refined it into a seed. This trip had taken them 50 years of time. Lin Yu subdued it and placed it into Lin Xiu's body. This was a strand of factor. Lin Xiu had already established a connection with the strange creature in the 10th universe. This was called fighting poison with poison. Lin Xiu was about to lose himself. As that strand of origin factor entered Lin Xiu's body, his entire body shook. His eyes suddenly opened. One of his eyes was gray, while the other was black. It was extremely strange. Lin Yu imprinted the 9 ancient characters in the void. Then, the clay pot suppressed above. Lin Xiu appeared in the 10th universe. The 2 men were shocked and quickly retreated. They couldn't withstand this power. The aura here became dense. But now, the strange aura on Lin Xiu's body was constantly emitting, and his body was undergoing indescribable changes. The 2 auras were devouring each other. Now, they could only hope that the strange aura that Lin Xiu had mastered could completely devour the strange origin that was attached to him. Lin Xiu, maintain your original heart. Lin Yu's voice contained Tao sounds. Lin Xiu's body trembled. He also sensed Lin Yu's voice. The true spirit hidden in his body was awakening at this moment. But Lin Yu didn't allow the strange aura in Lin Xiu's body to be too strong. He used all his strength. At this moment, it seemed a little difficult. The 2 strange powers must have reached the supreme realm when they were alive, although they were now infinitely weakened. But whether it was Lin Yu or Lin Xiu, it was extremely terrifying. The God King's token appeared outside his body. Lin Yu was communicating with the God Coffin not far away. Back in the day, the supreme beings of the universe had once fought side by side and had a connection with each other. Under the illumination of the God's token's token, the coffin also began to emit light of light. Without the corrosion of the strange substance, the divine coffin shone with a golden light. It had a supreme sense of nobility, and, at the same time, it had an aura of disdain for the world. The strange power in Lin Xiu's body was suppressed to a certain degree again. At this moment, the strange power in his body had become extremely weak under the illumination of the pottery jar, ancient characters, and living coffin. Lin Xiu's true spirit had already taken the lead. He began to take control of his body. The gray and black in his eyes were fading. He regained his clarity. Lin Xiu was controlling the strange substance that he had once used and began to devour the strange life form that possessed him. This was a long struggle, but Lin Yu wasn't anxious. He stood at the side. The power in his body was continuously injected into the ancient word and the pot. But an accident happened. Lin Yu underestimated the power of the strange life form that had once fought with the Supreme. Lin Xiu was devoured. Black and gray returned to his sea of consciousness. His eyes were in that state again. At this moment, the stone sword that Lin Yu had obtained was trembling. It appeared beside Lin Yu. It reflected the light of an ancient word and finally fused together. The entire 10th universe was shaking because of the appearance of these artifacts, as if it couldn't bear the existence of several things at the same time. Even the Tao laws were in an unstable state. The golden light of the coffin enveloped the entire 10th universe, preventing destruction. Lin Yu was also under great pressure. The inner world of the 12th layer appeared behind him. An incomparably majestic power was continuously blessing Lin Yu's body. Lin Yu had already used the space-time superposition ability of the God King token. His own strength had reached an unprecedented peak. The entire star field fell into destruction. Under the cover of the space-time power, a large star field seemed to be experiencing reincarnation, destruction, and rebirth. The man and woman were at the farthest place, looking at this scene in shock. When the 10th universe invaded the 12th universe, God King Lin's strength was far from this. Now, the man was already speechless, only feeling that his mouth and tongue were dry. He, the God King of the 10th universe, was defeated in the hands of Lin Yu. In their eyes, it was only natural. With God King Lin's talent, I'm afraid that even the 12 universes won't be able to restrain him. The woman couldn't help but say in the end. Several artifacts emitted mighty power at the same time. The strangeness in Lin Xiu's body was suppressed once again. He could hear the strange creature that possessed Lin Xiu's body roaring continuously. It was being devoured by Lin Xiu's strength. 20 years passed in the blink of an eye. Lin Yu had the support of the 12 inner worlds, and his strength was endless. At the same time, the upper 3 layers of the inner world that contained his 3 lives Tao, fruit, emitted the sound of scriptures. Lin Yu directly activated the upper 3 layers of the inner world and suppressed Lin Xiu's head. At this moment, Lin Xiu's strength continued to rise. The strangeness in his body gradually dissipated. After a long time, Lin Xiu opened his clear eyes. He had truly broken through to the original God realm. But the mysterious thing was that he didn't condense his inner world. Because of the strange power, the light spot in his inner world shattered and merged into his body. Now, he had taken a step that no one had ever taken before. He had merged his body with his inner world, and there was no distinction between the two. He was now a world of his own. In terms of strength, he had surpassed ordinary original God realm cultivators. Lin Yu looked at Lin Xiu with satisfaction, but he now had a sense of weakness. He had been using his strongest strength for decades and had consumed a lot of his strength. But fortunately, he had condensed the 12 layers of the inner world. Not only was his strength endless, but his recovery ability was also very terrifying. Thank you, Divine King Lin. Lin Xiu came to Lin Yu's side. Now, the hidden danger in his body had been removed, but there were still some hidden dangers left. After all, the strange race was hard to predict. The two came to the 2 men. The strangeness in the 10th universe had been completely removed. The 2 men knelt in the void and bowed to Lin Yu. Lin Yu asked them to get up. Divine King Lin, I will now bring you to the place where the fragment was found. The man said respectfully. They had been waiting for decades and had been in shock. They were shocked by Lin Yu's strength. And Lin Yu had solved the main culprit that caused the destruction of the 10th universe. So their attitude towards Lin Yu had become extremely respectful. Chapter 1279. Under the man's lead, the few of them came to an unknown place in the 10th universe. This place used to be a city in the past, but later it was infected by a strange creature, and most of the creatures turned into nourishment. It had long been abandoned. The 2 men had only obtained the fragments of the pottery jar by chance. It's just below this city. They came to an ancient well in the center of the city. The man pointed to the ancient well and said slowly, "There's a supreme aura here." Back then, our realm wasn't very deep. The 2 men didn't expect that the pottery jar fragments they obtained so easily would have such great power. Otherwise, they should have risked their lives to enter the depths back then. Perhaps there would be some opportunity that could save the 10th universe and not be as miserable as they were now. Lin Yu looked at the ancient well. He already had a guess in his heart. This ancient well was similar to the ancient well on Earth's immortal island. There seemed to be vague traces of ancient characters on it, but there was still a strange power left on it. It removed the imprint of the ancient characters. Under the passage of time, the strange aura had been eliminated. It should be a few million years ago, after the ancestor of the 10th universe returned from the realm sea. He came here and tried to break the seal here. He had been in contact with that strange creature for a long time. Therefore, He knew many secrets about the 10th universe. Lin nodded. That should be the case. But the seal here was very powerful back then, and the ancestor who controlled the 10th universe had entered it. But for some reason, he returned without success and withdrew. In the end, the two of them managed to obtain the fragments of the pottery jar by chance. Lin Yu couldn't sense the aura of the pottery jar in it now. But no matter what, since they came here, the strange creature was still thinking about it. Maybe there was something in it. The few of them stepped into it. As they continued to move forward, Lin Yu had entered several similar ancient wells and was familiar with the way. Although this place blocked his divine sense, Lin Yu still quickly found the way. The phosphorescence was dense. There was a supreme aura here. Could it be that the ancient well on Earth's immortal island was left behind by the Supreme in the universe? Lin Yu had his suspicions. If that was the case, then what was the goal of those supreme beings? Nothing was known. However, after Lin Yu reached his current level, he seemed to be getting closer to the truth of history. It was a pity that his first ancestor had used great magic power to cut off a section of the river of time, making everything unknown. Otherwise, Lin Yu's cultivation base would rise again, and he would be able to obtain the truth of history from the river of time. Not long after, they arrived at a spacious area. This is where we found the fragment. The man pointed at the empty area. There was a huge battle. Lin Xiu looked at the traces around him. In the 10th universe, there are creatures that can fight with the original God Realm experts who are contaminated. Lin Xiu quickly analyzed. The ancestor of the 10th universe that year was at the original God Realm. There were obvious traces of battle here. As expected, the strange aura still lingered in the air. At the same time, there was also the power of the principle of the original God Realm. Presumably, a long time ago, the 10th universe had an existence that could resist the original God Realm experts. But why didn't Lin Xiu find it after so many years in the 10th universe? This didn't make sense. However, there was one possibility. In the battle that year, the original God Realm expert had already died. The strange creature was also severely injured, so it had no choice but to enter the coffin. It wanted to obtain the corpse of the Supreme Being and obtain more power to restore itself to its peak. The ancestor of the 10th universe that was possessed by the strange substance was already at the late stage of the original God Realm. His strength was unfathomable, and his methods were very strange. Who could fight against him? Lin Xiu couldn't help but feel puzzled. Is there any other ancient god in the 10th universe that has been sleeping for so long? Lin Xiu asked. The two men were once core disciples of the 10th universe. They belonged to the upper echelons and should know about this matter. No, the only ancient god has already passed away in the passage of time, the man replied. A long time ago, before our ancestors returned. This made people more and more puzzled. Let's go in and see, Lin Yu said calmly. Perhaps the truth of everything was in the deepest part of this ancient well. They nodded. They continued to move forward. They didn't know how much time had passed. A huge underground palace appeared in front of them. The aura of time was leaking out. They didn't know how long it had existed. The stone pillars were huge, richly ornamented, and there wasn't a trace of damage. They moved their gazes forward. There was a stone door with traces of loosening. It seemed to be depicting the deeds of the Supreme Being of the 10th universe. However, there was a fog on it, making it difficult to investigate. Their realm wasn't enough to witness the deeds of the Supreme Being. However, they could feel the aura on the stone wall that made people's hearts palpitate. It had the momentum of looking down on heaven and earth. Just as they were staring at the stone wall, the surface of the stone wall gradually became illusory. The shadow of a clay pot emerged. It affected the clay pot in Lin Yu's body. The clay pot glowed on its own. The primitive aura carried the power of origin of all things. This was the true power of the clay pot. However, the clay pot on the stone wall was just a reflection, not the real thing. Back then, the Supreme Being of the 10th universe controlled the clay pot. Lin Yu was puzzled. At this moment, the clay pot's shadow dissipated. In the endless power, two fragments of the clay pot were revealed. They were the size of half a palm, far bigger than the two men's. It turned out that there were still fragments of the clay pot here. However, because of the stone wall, Lin Yu couldn't detect them. It seems that the supreme being of the past used a great method to protect the fragments of the clay pot, Lin Yu said. The two fragments of the clay pot flew toward Lin Yu and were held in his hands. At this moment, there was a sudden change in the stone wall. A pair of pale hands appeared. Then, a body appeared. An illusory figure stood in the void. Who dares to take the clay pot? The voice of questioning was incomparably majestic. The illusory figure was wearing a golden armor. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, carrying a sharp aura. It made people shiver. The aura he displayed was extremely powerful. The late stage of the original God realm was undoubtedly revealed. However, half of his face was covered in white bones, which made him look ferocious. When he appeared and looked at Lin Yu, he seemed to feel the aura of the clay pot. You have collected all the clay pots. The man wearing the golden armor didn't seem to be old. However, his realm was only close to the peak of the original God realm. He said, "Your realm is the original God realm. Forbidden." The man looked at Lin Yu. "I am one of the 12 God Kings of the universe, Lin Yu. Please give me the fragments of the clay pot." Lin Yu replied politely. "The one my father mentioned, the one who will face the calamity. You are just at the early stage of the original God realm." "Too weak," the man said slowly. His face was hesitant. "I can give you the fragments of the clay pot. However, you must show me your inner world," the man said slowly. The man's body was illusory. Apparently, he wasn't a living person anymore. He should have died long ago. Because of the stone wall, he kept a wisp of his true spirit and could exist in this world. Now, Lin Yu and the others understood that this man should be the one who had stopped the ancestor of the 10th universe from being strangely controlled. "Sir, may I ask who you are?" Lin Yu asked. He could feel a strange aura from the man. "I'm the eldest son of the 10th universe, Kun," the man said slowly. Every word and sentence was enough to shock everyone. While talking, Kun isolated the space here. Only Lin Yu and him were left. Lin Yu didn't look surprised when he heard Kun. He seemed to have guessed it, from the golden armor he wore. However, when Kun was alive, his competence should be much higher than the peak of the original God realm. However, half of his face was destroyed. Even if he only had his true spirit left, it would be hard to recover. Chapter 1280. He'd suffered an injury to his core when he was alive, and there were still terrifying scars on his true spirit. Lin Yu looked at Kun at this moment. His expression was very calm. "What happened back then?" Lin Yu asked. He was very curious. Back then, Kun must have been a genius who had condensed the 9th level of his inner world. It was just that he had passed away for some reason. Lin Yu had condensed 90% of his inner world, and the two could only sense each other, fighting against the anomalies. Kun said casually. Even now, there was still a look of disappointment in his eyes. Back then, the first generation of the godly king bloodline of the 10th universe had all died, and I was the only one left. Under the shadow of my father, I managed to retain a trace of my true spirit, he said slowly. His words were very calm, without the slightest emotion. However, Lin Yu could still feel how terrifying that battle back then was. The entire supreme lineage had already fallen. Even the supreme back then had no time to care about other things and couldn't protect his descendants. "You are also a descendant of the supreme of the 12 universes?" Kun's eyes became deep as he looked at Lin Yu. He sensed the aura of that person from before history from Lin Yu. "That's right." Lin Yu nodded. "Everything has a cause and effect." Kun sighed. "Now that the anomalies have begun to invade the universe, there must be a big problem with those who fought against the anomalies in the land of origin. A few million years ago, I seriously injured a revived supreme anomaly," he said slowly. However, Lin Yu had already guessed this matter. Otherwise, the 12 universes might have been destroyed by that anomaly a few million years ago, without any power to resist. After all, His father was only at the pinnacle of the godly king realm back then. However, Lin Yu gradually understood. In the past, his father's talent was absolutely terrifying. It was only because of the changes in the world that he couldn't break through. There seemed to be a mysterious imprint in the 12 universes that prevented the living beings from breaking through to a higher realm. This was what Lin Yu had learned in the Grand Miscontinent. This was because there was a blurry imprint that was on the verge of fading away in the eastern sea of the Hong main continent. That imprint was left behind by a strange entity, and it could restrict the advancement of the creatures of the 12 universes. However, it seemed to have been destroyed a few million years ago. Now, only a few traces were left. This was the result of a strange and supreme method being used, a deliberate act. Lin Yu and Kuan stood against each other. Both of them had learned what they wanted to know. Kuan stopped talking and slowly said, "Since you've gained the clay jar's approval, you can take the shard away. Now, I'm going into a deep slumber. I hope that in the future, I can slay 1 or 2 strange creatures." As he spoke, his eyes flashed with killing intent, because his bloodline had all died in the fight against the darkness. Even his father, an invincible character in the past, was like this, disappearing into the dust of history. "Successor, I think highly of you. I hope to see you again in the final battle." Kuan was in a bad state. He was on the verge of dying at any time. Now, even if he could sleep until then, he probably wouldn't have any power left to fight against the darkness. Lin Yu nodded and said, "That day will come." As he spoke, Lin Yu used the power of the king of God's order. At the same time, the time and space Tao laws began to emanate from his body. They shrouded Kuan's body. A few million years ago, his true spirit had suffered a severe injury when he tried to stop the strange creature that sneaked into the 10th universe. In these few million years, he had been in a deep slumber. Now, Lin Yu wanted to reverse time and heal Kuan's injuries. However, Kuan's strength was too terrifying when he was alive. Even though Lin Yu had mastered the time and space Tao laws at the same time, it was still difficult for him to activate the king of God's order. Kuan was a little surprised by this power. He smiled and said, "Looks like you've obtained your first ancestor's inheritance." He didn't reject Lin Yu's kindness. "This is a great karma. I have a premonition. In the near future, I will repay you." Kuan's condition was gradually recovering. The power to reverse time and space in the king of God's order was very mysterious and terrifying. It was far more terrifying than those healing sacred medicines. He could reverse time and space from the origin and restore you to the time when you were not injured. However, it was too late. Kuan had already recovered to his peak state from a few million years ago. Lin Yu wanted to continue using the power of the king of God's order. He wanted to restore Kuan to his peak state from prehistory. However, at this moment, the Tao laws on Kuan's body erupted, and he broke free from the power of the king of God's order. "Don't continue forward. It involves too many taboos. You can't resist it." Kuan broke free and said slowly, "This is enough. I'm already a dead person. There's no need to waste unnecessary power." After Kuan finished speaking, he entered the stone wall and once again appeared in a deep slumber. The stone wall returned to silence. Lin Yu stood in front of the stone wall and bowed slightly. This kind of peerless talent had passed away in order to protect the living beings of the universe. Even if only his true spirit was left, he still wanted to suppress the strange. This kind of courage was worthy of respect. The two men also felt Kuan's aura from the deepest part of their bloodline. This kind of respect came from the origin. Back then, it was also Kuan's intention that the two of them could take away the fingernail-sized fragment of the pottery jar. Even if he was in a deep slumber, he still retained a bit of consciousness. He wanted to preserve the last bloodline of the 10th universe. The two men bowed to the stone wall 9 times, and their heads were broken. After that, the 4 of them did not stay. Kuan needed a quiet environment to sleep. Lin Yu and the others walked out of the ancient well and said slowly to Lin Xiu, "Lin Xiu, after we go out this time, you must guard this place and not let anyone enter." Now, All the living beings in the 10th universe were under the invasion of the strange matter. Only the two men and their bloodline were left. These remaining people would be the kindling. One day, they would reappear in the 10th universe. Thank you, godly King Lin. The two men bowed deeply to Lin Yu. You can follow Lin Xiu and cultivate, Lin Yu said slowly. Although Lin Yu killed their godly king, he was still under the control of the strange matter. However, the godly king of the past had been completely controlled by something strange. It could even be said that he was no longer the true, godly king of the 10th universe. Being killed by Lin Yu prevented the 10th universe from further revealing the darkness, which was also excellent. Therefore, the two men were very grateful to Lin Yu. Hearing Lin Yu's words, they were very happy. At least in the lonely 10th universe, there were still people protecting them. Lin Xiu did not refuse. They want to go back. There's still 20 years. They said that the universe under their control will hold a competition. They have been waiting for you to wake up for a long time. Lin Yu and Lin Xiu stood on the mountain. At this moment, Lin Yu said to Lin Xiu with a smile, "No problem." Lin Xiu looked at the two men. Although Lin Xiu was not good with words, he had long regarded Lin Yu as a brother in his heart. Otherwise, after Lin Yu passed away, he would not have rushed the seedlings to help them grow and forcefully used the strange matter to break through to the original God realm. It was just to protect the 12 universes. In his heart, the 12 universes had long been his home. After speaking, Lin Yu used falsified heaven and returned to the 12 universes. Qin Wunyan and the others in the 12 universes were now nervously preparing for the universe grand tournament in 20 years. Chapter 1281. After Lin Yu returned, he spent the past 20 years accompanying the Jade Pure Goddess and the others. Su Yishui had returned to the 5th universe. She was also preparing to let her disciples participate in this convention. Lin Yu was on one side. Qin Yi was peeling lotus seeds, and the Jade Pure Goddess was playing the zither. On the shore of the lake, there were goldfish leaping up. The originally ordinary goldfish had shown signs of transforming into a dragon in the past 20 years. They had been listening to the zither music of the Jade Pure Goddess all year round. At this time, their bloodline had begun to evolve, and they already had spiritual intelligence. Now, under Qin Yi's feet, they were constantly swaying their tails, hoping to ask for a lotus seed. The lotus seeds that Lin Yu ate were all of the best quality in the universe. However, later on, Lin Yu let Qin Wunyan and the others just pick ordinary lotus seeds. Because now, even if they were saint or divine grade, they were no longer useful to him. "You're the most gluttonous," Qin Yi muttered and threw down a lotus seed. The goldfish that was shining with golden light jumped up and ate the lotus seed. Although these lotus seeds were very ordinary, but under the influence of Lin Yu's Dao Law, they carried the aura of Lin Yu's Dao Law. The benefits for others were huge, especially the goldfish that Qin Yi mentioned. It obtained the greatest benefits. Now, on its forehead, there was a faint bulge. With the power of Dao Law, it comprehended a trace of Lin Yu's Dao Law. This attracted Qin Yi's attention. "I think I can also participate in the competition in a few months." Qin Yi rubbed Lin Yu's shoulders and said mischievously, "Of course you can." Lin Yu smiled. The zither music stopped. The Jade Pure Goddess also came to the side of the two. "Sister Jade Pure, what do you think?" Qin Yi said. The Jade Pure Goddess heard the conversation between the two, but she said, "You are now the God Empress. I'm afraid this is not appropriate." Qin Yi's eyes were a little disappointed. However, the Jade Pure Divine Maiden wasn't spouting nonsense. If Qin Yi participated, those people would know her identity. At that time, it would be difficult for them to do anything. Now that Qin Yi thought about it, that was also what she meant. However, there was still some sadness in his eyes. "How about this?" "What?" Qin Yi threw the lotus seed into the lake. He arrived in front of the Jade Pure Divine Maiden. The two women huddled together, and no one knew what they were saying. "Sister Yuqing has a way," Qin Yi said happily. Qin Yi's current cultivation was in the saint realm, and she had a long lifespan. Time did not leave the slightest trace on him. Since that's the case, I'll teach you a technique. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden was not stingy at all. She taught Qin a technique that she had mastered. Thank you, big sister Yuqing. I will go into seclusion now and wait for my good news. Qin smiled and left the lakeside. The current Sky City was already in the newly built Sky region. In the City of Divine Kings, there was a secret place for cultivation that Lin Yu had built using time and space, as well as the power of the Divine King's order. The flow of time inside was 100 times slower than the outside world. Only those who had made great contributions in the 12 universes could enter to cultivate. Of course, Qin was an exception. Lin Yu smiled and shook his head. He did not like to restrict people. Since Qin wanted to do whatever she wanted, he would let her do it. After watching Qin leave, the Jade Pure Divine Maiden stood beside Lin Yu. There was a hint of melancholy in her eyes. Yuqing, what's wrong? Lin Yu noticed something strange and asked at this moment, how long will this peaceful time last? The Jade Pure Divine Maiden turned her head and looked at Lin Yu, as if she wanted to get a definite answer. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden's cultivation level was not low. Although she did not know what Lin Yu would face in the future, she was already worried. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden had a cold personality. In the time when she was with Lin Yu, she had never shown such an attitude. Lin Yu looked at the Jade Pure Divine Maiden and comforted her. When all the chaos is over, we can spend time together and watch the changes of time. Lin Yu's eyes were as confident as ever. However, in the deepest part of his eyes, there was a hint of worry. Although the Supremes of the past temporarily resisted the Black Calamity, in the end, they all passed away. Even a figure as powerful as the first ancestor of the past did not escape the fate of death. Could he reach such a level? Everything was unknown. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden understood Lin Yu. At this moment, she came to Lin Yu's side and wrapped her arms around Lin Yu's neck. Her beautiful face leaned on Lin Yu's chest as she murmured, I have always believed in you, but the scenes of 2,000 years ago, when I think about it now, it is still shocking. I thought that I would never see you again. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden said softly. She usually showed a cold look, but she loved Lin Yu more than anyone else. Otherwise, she would not have waited for Lin Yu for so many years. Even though she was imprisoned in the City of Divine Kings, she still did not give up. It was because she had always believed that Lin Yu would make a strong comeback one day. In fact, she was not wrong. Lin Yu stroked the Jade Pure Divine Maiden's hair. He knew that the Jade Pure Divine Maiden had suffered. It was just that after becoming the Divine King of the 12 universes, she had always been a threat. Therefore, when Lin Yu increased his strength, he neglected the Jade Pure Divine Maiden. I will compensate you well. Lin Yu looked at the beautiful person in his arms and said slowly. Now, a blush appeared on the Jade Pure Divine Maiden's cheeks. Now, she received an affirmative answer from Lin Yu. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden nodded softly. Lin Yu carried the Jade Pure Divine Maiden and used falsified heaven. In the blink of an eye, the two of them arrived at the thatched cottage. I want to give birth to a child for you to continue your bloodline. Lin Yu was on top. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden's breathing was a little rapid. Between her breaths, there was a seductive musk. Lin Yu was no longer young. It was time to consider this problem. This was a different kind of battle that Lin Yu had experienced. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden's graceful figure was faintly discernible. In the 100,000 years that Lin Yu had experienced, the Jade Pure Divine Maiden was the only woman he had seen who could be rated as a 10. Whether it was her figure or appearance, there was no one in the world who could compare to her. 2 hours passed in a row. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden was sweating profusely. She murmured in a low voice, "You are stronger than before. Is it because of the increase in your realm?" She asked curiously. It actually took 2 hours. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden said, "Do you still remember the time?" Lin Yu asked. "Yes." The Jade Pure Divine Maiden nodded obediently. "It seems that you are still not focused enough." Lin Yu was full of smiles. Gradually, the sky turned dark. The moon of the Hongmeng continent was exceptionally bright today. Through the window, it shone into the thatched cottage. One could only vaguely see the charming figure inside. 3 days passed just like that. The voices in the thatched cottage rose and fell one after another. The jade pure divine maiden's hair fell in front of her. She sat down on the bed and helped Linyu put on his clothes. The two of them walked out the door. One was tall and straight like a mountain. The other was elegant and otherworldly, like a pair of jade. The two of them came to the island in the eastern sea of the Hongmeng continent. There was once the old divine king's shadow here. The two of them came to pay respects to the old divine king. They stayed here for a month. They were just like an ordinary couple. Linyu hunted while the jade pure divine maiden cooked. In the end, they snuggled together and watched the sun set in the west, revealing the vastness of the earth. Soon, a few months had passed. Linyu and the jade pure divine maiden had already returned to the divine king city of the heaven domain. There was already a sea of people here. They were all the geniuses of the 12 universes. Qin Wunyan and Qin Ji were in charge of screening the participants of each division in the 12 universes. This matter took nearly a year's time. This couldn't help but make them anxious. However, they were still meticulous. Chapter 1282. 5 days before the start of the grand competition, Qin Wunyan, Qin Ji, and the others stood on the high platform. Below him were 32 cultivators of various realms, all of whom were filled with excitement. To be able to stand out in the selection of the 12 universes was enough to show that their battle strength and talent had been recognized. Qin Wunyan spoke at this time. Although you can stand out in the 12 universes, there is no need to be proud. Our 12 universes are the first universes commanded by the godly king. If you can't win, won't you lose your reputation? His voice was as strong as a bell, exploding in everyone's heart. After hearing those words, the expressions of the 30-plus people all turned serious. Some of them were no longer arrogant. They seemed to have sobered up because of Qin Wunyan's words. We are native creatures of the 12 universes. We can't lose our reputation. Someone clenched his fists. They were all top geniuses from various domains in the 12 universes. They had been influenced by the rise of the 12 universes since they were young. Although this competition didn't involve life and death, it was related to the reputation of their main universes. After Qin Wunyan finished speaking, these people clearly displayed their unyielding fighting strength. Linyu didn't participate in the grand competition of the universes commanded by Linyu. He was only there as a spectator. This was just a whim of the Archaeosaurus and the others, but the significance was also very great. If living creatures were always allowed to live in an ivory tower, no matter how well they developed and how quickly they developed, they would eventually collapse without a sense of crisis. In the blink of an eye, a few days had passed. On the altar of the city of godly kings, a gate gradually appeared. The first to return to the 12 universes were the Archaeosaurus, the Dark Priest, and the others. Is the heavenly phoenix afraid? He still hasn't come? The Archaeosaurus laughed. His laughter spread throughout the city of godly kings. What did you say? At this time, another gate appeared. The heavenly phoenix led a group of talented creatures to the 12 universes. His figure appeared, and the first thing he did was to question the Archaeosaurus. I thought you were scared. Archaeosaurus pursed his lips. Why would I, Heavenly Phoenix, be afraid? Heavenly Phoenix said indifferently, why don't we have a competition before the competition? He stared at the Archaeosaurus without giving them any face. This caused the first Cheelant's expression to become somewhat unsightly. Let's follow the rules, the Archaeosaurus said. We agreed that this is a competition between the various universes. It doesn't involve us. However, the Heavenly Phoenix's aura had already locked onto the Archaeosaurus. It seemed that she was determined to suppress the arrogant Archaeosaurus for a period of time. If you're not convinced, we can add more stakes. The Archaeosaurus changed the topic. I'll bet on your foul mouth, Heavenly Phoenix said slowly. This made the Archaeosaurus' expression turn ugly. He approached the Heavenly Phoenix and said, My little ones are all here. Give me some face. Why should I give it to you? Heavenly Phoenix asked. 1 calamity herb. The Archaeosaurus cared about his face and threw out the price at this moment. 10, or we'll fight now. Heavenly Phoenix was now a half-step progenitor, and her strength was slightly higher than the Archaeosaurus. She didn't care about the Archaeosaurus' face at all, and wanted to fight at the slightest disagreement. The Archaeosaurus turned his head and looked at the creatures he brought with him with a strange expression. He couldn't help but have an ugly expression. In the end, he gritted his teeth and said, 10 then, but you have to say a few words of praise. Okay. Heavenly Phoenix nodded. 10 calamity herbs quietly fell into the Heavenly Phoenix's hands. The calamity herb was a special product of the second universe. It had an excellent effect on the cultivation of the godly king realm and even the progenitor realm. Heavenly Phoenix knew about it, so she directly asked for an exorbitant price. Humph, if you want to fight, then let's fight. The Archaeosaurus returned to his own camp and had the intention of giving advice. Archaeosaurus is invincible in the universe. Let's wait for my realm to increase. Then I'll come and ask for a few moves from you. Heavenly Phoenix saw the benefits and spared the Archaeosaurus, no longer being aggressive. The Archaeosaurus said arrogantly, "Of course, that's not a problem." Really? Then thank you, Archaeosaurus, for your guidance in the days to come. Heavenly Phoenix's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a hint of a conspiracy that had succeeded. Now, the Archaeosaurus looked at the people behind him with a respectful expression. He was also riding a tiger and couldn't get off, so he could only bite the bullet and agree. Then, another gate opened. Terrifying spatial fluctuations were generated, causing people's clothes to flutter. The Buddha had now arrived with the people who had been selected from the third universe. They were all dressed in white, and their expressions were calm. There was a sense of indifference. Buddha still has this attitude, the Archaeosaurus muttered. But this was heard clearly by the Buddha. The Buddha's current realm had completely broken through the ancestor realm. There was an unfathomable feeling. He smiled and came to the side of the Archaeosaurus. This couldn't help but make the Archaeosaurus a little angry. Buddha, you are here. The Archaeosaurus came to the front of the Buddha and greeted. The Buddha had existed for a long time, longer than the Archaeosaurus and the others, and had made great contributions to the living beings of the 12 universes. There was nothing wrong with the Archaeosaurus and the others calling him respectfully. The Buddha looked at the Archaeosaurus with a smile. Seeing the Archaeosaurus like this, he didn't pursue the matter. This made the Archaeosaurus breathe a sigh of relief. Not long after, Lin Yuan also arrived. In the afternoon, Lin Xiu also brought the two men here. In the main hall, everyone was talking and laughing. They had full confidence in the people they had selected. On the other hand, Lin Xiu looked aloof from worldly affairs. Because after the strange invasion of the 10th universe, only the man and the woman were left. They were in the Sage realm, so this time they only participated in the competition of the Sage realm. And it was only important to participate. They didn't have the intention to win. Lin Xiu, you are fine. That's great. Lin Yuan came to Lin Xiu's side. He patted Lin Xiu's shoulder heavily. The two hugged heavily, and there was no need to say more about their feelings. At that time, Lin Yuan wanted to replace Lin Xiu and go to the Universe Convention, but his strength was only at the peak of the God King realm after the baptism of the blood essence of the Sky Phoenix and the other monsters. Lin Jianyu also followed Lin Yuan in the 7th universe. At this time, he was eating fruits and other things, wolfing them down and muttering, "The things in the 12 universes are more appetizing. Big brother, it's so bitter in the 7th universe." Lin Yu sat on the God King's throne with a smile. The 12 universes were peaceful and thriving. Since we are all here, let's agree that the competition will officially begin in 3 days. Qin Wunyan and Qin Ji suggested. The realms of the creatures selected from the universes managed by the Buddha were uneven, and after a long journey, they needed time to recuperate. We have to agree on the wager of the competition at this time, and the reward of the winning creature. The Archaeosaurus suggested with bad intentions. He was obviously targeting the Sky Phoenix. Because the Sky Phoenix managed the sixth universe for less than 100 years, it was expected that she didn't have complete control. Chapter 1283. Anything is fine. Heavenly Phoenix didn't care at all. In addition to taking out a few flawless Sage Realm cultivation methods for our subordinates, we will also bet 10 Ancestor Realm medicinal pills. Archaeosaurus said slowly. There was a sense of success in his eyes. After several people discussed, there was no objection. Flawless Sage Realm cultivation methods, plus medicinal pills to help break through. These were the conditions given to the winner. In that case, as the godly king, I can't not give anything. The winner of each universe can get a chance to preach alone. This promise could be said to be very tempting. The personal preaching of an original God Realm powerhouse who condensed 90% of his inner world was so amazing that these contestants might break their heads. I don't know if godly King Lin can participate and get a chance to preach alone. At this time, the godly king of the fifth universe, Su Ishue, leisurely came and entered the hall. Behind her, there were more than a dozen women, each of them beautiful and graceful. The cinnabar between their eyebrows made them even more tempting. For a time, the men in the hall stared with their eyes wide open. Qin Wunyan couldn't help drooling. As the people of the fifth universe entered the hall, there was a fragrant wind. It filled the entire hall. Petals fluttered. More than a dozen people were like fairies from the immortal world. Their graceful steps, graceful posture, with a sense of temptation. Cough, cough. Qin Ji coughed lightly, reminding Qin Wunyan to pay attention to his posture. Qin Wunyan recovered at this time. Of course, Lin Yu naturally knew that Qin Ji was just joking. This is the first major competition between universes. My fifth universe will take out a godly king weapon. Su Ishue made a big move. In her hand, a small pagoda that was completely flawless appeared, and it contained an astonishing power. However, the fifth universe will not be defeated. Her eyes were brimming with confidence. Qin Wunyan and others went to each camp to announce the rewards. Gasps could be heard everywhere. The contestants were like injected with chicken blood. The rewards of this major competition surprised them. As long as he won, he would definitely be able to soar into the sky in the future. In particular, they had been unable to sleep for the past 3 days because of the opportunity to receive the Divine King's teachings. Even the 2 men from Universe 10 were looking forward to it. 3 days passed. The grand competition officially began. The contestants who had arrived at the square were filled with anticipation and excitement. This was especially true for the 12 universes, who all wore solemn expressions. Over the past 3 days, they had come to understand that the competition was extremely fierce. The people who came here were all Archaeosaurus. They were carefully selected. They came from various universes and were all extraordinarily talented beings. In this assembly, we will first select one's temperament. Qin Wunyan stood on a high platform and said carefully. The entire arena was in a hubbub of voices. The overall score was 3 matches. First, it would be one's temperament. Then, it would be one's training. Only those who remained would participate in the competition. As Qin Wunyan finished speaking, a bead appeared in his hand. This was a divine item that Lin Yu had used some tricks to refine, the trial orb. As the bead emitted light, it enveloped the entire square. The scene here gradually changed. Everyone seemed to have come to a barren land, as if they had left the 12 universes. Above the void, there was a high platform. They were divided by cultivation. From the Saint Realm to the Emperor Realm, there were a total of 3 levels. The world here was also divided into 3 levels. Lin Yu can now easily build a small world. It contained the power of the rules that Lin Yu had set. The people who came to this world could be seen after a short period of time. In the 12 universes, the saintess of the Wangxian sect was now in the Saint Realm. She took the lead and stepped forward. There was a bamboo forest in front of her. It looked very ordinary and did not attract attention at all. Outside the bamboo forest, there was a stone tablet with 3 bold and powerful words written on it. Chaotic Heart Forest. Who do you think will be the first to step out of the saint realm? The dark divine priest said slowly with a smile. The current saintess of the Wangxian sect is not bad. Lin Yu said. He had been in contact with the current saintess of the Wangxian sect. Goddess Yuqing also agreed with Lin Yu's statement. There's another man who looks ordinary but has a fair face. He's also not bad, Qin Wenyan said. This person also came from the 12 universes and was personally selected by him. At that time, he was stunned for a long time, because before that, he did not know that there was such an outstanding person in the 12 universes. He did not come until the last day of the selection. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the light screen in front of them. There was a figure with a sneaky face. Lin Yu's mouth had a hint of smile. Although the man with a fair face had a profound concealment aura and a transformation technique, how could he escape Lin Yu's eyes? Divine King Lin, you could see it too? Goddess Yuqing smiled faintly. Great Sun Boundless Buddha and Su Yishui also saw the true face of the man with fair face. They could not help but have a strange look on their faces. He deliberately suppressed his aura. It seems that he can break through to the Divine King realm at any time. Archiosros's eyes were shining as he continued. Qin Wenyan, your method is a little disappointing. You used a loophole in the rules to find a human who can break through to the Divine King realm at any time. Aren't you embarrassed? Aren't you the same? Heavenly Phoenix squinted and said, a human from the second universe, wearing a simple green robe and carrying a long sword on his back. His aura was extraordinary. He was silent and did not hesitate to enter the chaotic heart forest. When did Qin Tianming, that kid, hide it from me? He reached the peak of the saint realm and is almost a half-step divine king. Archiosros said vaguely and turned his head to the side. Divine priest, do you know? He asked the dark divine priest. I don't know. Maybe Qin Tianming is really amazing. The dark divine priest did not know whether to laugh or cry. Qin Tianming had been standing at the peak of the saint realm for a long time. For so long, he was the focus of Archiosros and the others. Once, his family was destroyed by the divine king forces of the second universe, and only his bloodline was left. When Archiosros and the others arrived, he immediately became the dark divine priest's disciple. This time, the dark divine priest did not take him into consideration, but Archiosros pestered him to bring him here. Yes, yes, divine priest, your disciple is really amazing. Sea God Dragon also spoke. The three echoed each other. You already know the answer. Heavenly Phoenix looked at Archiosros and said disdainfully, my goddess of the fifth universe, Jiang Luo, is not weaker than them. Su Yishui sat beside Lin Yu. She said with a smile. Only then did they focus their attention on the girl that Su Yishui mentioned. There is a mysterious power dormant in her body. Great Sun Boundless Buddha nodded and said, it seems that Divine King Su has already regarded that girl as his successor. Jiang Luo, who Su Yishui mentioned, was also at the peak of the saint realm. In that realm, she was already atop existence. Moreover, Su Yishui personally taught her, so her strength should not be underestimated. In addition to these three people, the nine-headed lion that Lin Yuan brought from the seventh universe was not weaker than them. There were also two people from the 10th universe. They were one of the most powerful contenders in the saint realm this time. However, the chaotic heart force set up by Lin Yu was very difficult. It could evoke the deepest fear and horror in people's hearts. If one's Tao heart was not tough enough, they would be eliminated before they could even take 2 steps. Even the little saintess of the forgotten immortal sect slowed down a lot after walking more than 100 feet. Chapter 1284. At this time, Lin Yu and the others were on the high platform, watching the situation of the competition. After 3 days, the first person came out of the chaotic heart forest. However, what surprised everyone was that the first person to walk out of the chaotic heart forest was not Jiang Luo or the saintess of the forgotten immortal sect. It was an ordinary-looking young man from the third universe. I didn't expect you to hide so well. Archaeosaurus jumped up. He thought that Qin Tianming from the second universe that he managed would be able to crush everyone. He wanted to show off for a while. However, he didn't expect that the first person to walk out of the chaotic heart forest was an ordinary-looking young man from the Mahavajrana Buddha's management. The Buddha smiled and said, "Although Qinryu's realm is not as good as Qin Tianming's, his temperament and Tao heart are as firm as a rock. He has a clear heart to pursue the Tao." The Mahavajrana Buddha praised Qinryu from the third universe that he managed. This result was obviously beyond everyone's expectations. However, one's Tao heart could only be seen after going through trials and tests. Otherwise, it would be difficult to see through it. This was also the reason why the experts didn't expect Qinryu to win in the first round of the competition. However, in the path of cultivation, the Tao heart was the most important factor at the end. No matter how amazing one's talent was, if one's Tao heart wasn't tough enough, one could only suffer from qi deviation when faced with various difficulties in the path of cultivation. In the end, one's body and Tao would vanish. There are many records of this in the ancient books. This was also the reason why Lin, you created this trial. Qin Tianming, the young man that you carefully selected, isn't that good either, Heavenly Phoenix mocked. You still have the cheek to say that? Look at that person from the sixth universe. He's still struggling, Archaeosaurus retorted. Heavenly Phoenix ignored him. She chose to continue watching the trial. Archaeosaurus and Heavenly Phoenix continued to argue. Linyu just smiled. Back then, before he became one of the 12 godly kings of the universe, Archaeosaurus, Sea God Dragon, and Heavenly Phoenix were in the top 3 of the heavenly demon ranking. Now, the Sea God Dragon was also an Archaeosaurus. They were on the same side, so they didn't speak much. The Archaeosaurus and Heavenly Phoenix were already locked in a heated argument. As the competition continued, the two of them were on the verge of fighting. Fortunately, the Archaeosaurus still retained his rationality and knew that he was no match for the Heavenly Phoenix in the short term. The second was the fair-faced man from the 12 universes. This caused Qin Wunyin's face to brim with joy. It was just that when he found out the man's true identity, his face would be very interesting, and he didn't know what to think. Half a month passed. In the trial of the chaotic heart forest, half of the participants had already been eliminated. In the sky of the trial world, the number of people remaining and their names were displayed. The holy maiden of the Wang Xian sect looked up at the sky and fell into deep thought. She was not in a hurry to continue forward. Her experience in the chaotic heart forest had deepened her comprehension. More and more people arrived from the 12 universes. At this moment, the fair-faced man found the holy maiden of the Wang Xian sect and said, "Why don't we wait for the others from the 12 universes and enter the next trial?" He came in front of the holy maiden of the Wang Xian sect. There was a strange light in his eyes. Looking at the attire of the holy maiden of the Wang Xian sect, there was a deep feeling in his eyes. The holy maiden of the Wang Xian sect looked at the man who seemed to be very familiar with them and was stunned at first. Then, she nodded and said, "I was thinking the same thing." In front of them was the trial ground of the next round. There was a fog in front of them, and they couldn't see the specific scene. It was shrouded in mystery. Occasionally, they could only hear the terrifying roars of beasts. The remaining 5 participants from the 12 universes walked out of the chaotic heart forest. After some adjustment, they entered together. The second round of the trial tested individual strength and teamwork. As long as you were strong enough, entering alone was not a big deal. For example, Qin Tianming entered alone with a long sword on his back. He passed through the fog. The holy maiden of the Wang Xian sect and the others soon encountered the first round of attacks. They saw that the strange beasts here were formed from an unknown essence gold and seemed to have gained intelligence. They were innately aggressive towards living creatures. Moreover, the beasts formed from the essence gold had the power of at least the middle stage of the Saint Realm. Their physical bodies were extremely strong. Even when the holy maiden of the Wang Xian sect slashed with her sword, it only left a string of sparks. It only made them feel a little pain and retreat a few feet. This made them frown slightly. However, the strange beasts formed from the essence gold were quickly neutralized in the first wave of attacks. The few of them continued to move forward. Among them, there were also people who failed because of this. They were seriously injured. Although they didn't die, they still needed a long time to recuperate. They all came to the square with annoyance and reluctance. There were healing pills here. They could help them recover quickly. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. There were only a few people who could reach the final position of the sacred mountain. The sacred mountain was divided into 3 levels. They were the participants of various cultivation levels. The sacred realm was located at the top of the mountain. At this time, there was the holy maiden of the Wangxian sect, the fair-faced man, Qin Tianming, Jiang Luo, the 9-headed lion, and Shen Ruoyu. They each took one side. Their bodies exuded a powerful aura. After a short period of rest, they all realized that the real battle was coming. However, one could see the fighting spirit in their eyes. Until now, they didn't seem to value the rewards that much. What they wanted now was a battle to prove themselves. I'm Ruoyu from the 3rd universe. At the same time, I'm the great solar boundless Buddha, who is also my master. Ruoyu introduced himself. 12 universes, Holy Maiden of the Wangxian sect, Su Exant, the Holy Maiden of the Wangxian sect said. 2 universes, Qin Tianming. 7 universes, Jiu Ling, the 9-headed lion, said slowly. 5 universes, Jiang Luo. Nice to meet you. Jiang Luo's face was covered with a thin veil, which made it difficult for people to see her face. Her bare feet were suspended above the ground, her clothes fluttering in the wind. She looked very ethereal. When it was the fair-faced man's turn, he seemed to be a little hesitant, but he still cupped his hands and said, "Brothers, unfortunately, my surname is also Qin, and my name is Yi. Your name is close to the Tao. No wonder your talent is so experienced," Jiu Ling said at this time. Qin Tianming couldn't help but look at Qin Yi. After the few of them introduced themselves, they didn't say anything. They waited for the final announcement of the competition. Right now, they were the most outstanding talents in their respective universes. Everyone's eyes were focused on the light screen. At the same time, some people had already begun to discuss intensely who would be the victors of the grand competition. Chapter 1285. Lin Yu did not deliberately check everyone's cultivation. He sat on the God King's throne with a calm expression. Now, the Archaeosaurus and the others were quarreling and were about to fight. One of Sky Phoenix's subordinates was an Emperor Realm cultivator. As a most advantageous contestant this time, he had the bloodline of the demon race. There was a sharp light in his eyes, like a pure-blooded great rock. His body had endless power, and some of the Emperor Realm cultivators were unconsciously afraid. The battle was about to begin. Qin Yi's eyes were filled with anticipation. Time passed, and everyone had already entered the sacred mountain. The competition officially began. The remaining people were all outstanding figures in their respective universes. They all exuded confidence that they were invincible among their peers. There was even an old man among the Emperor Realm cultivators. He held a wine pot in his hand, and his body was surrounded by faintly discernible sword chi. He seemed to be a sword cultivator. Some people looked at the old man strangely. At this age, he still came to compete with them. It made people unable to help but laugh. This was another person selected by the Archaeosaurus. His name was Mo Li, and he was the first person in the 2nd universe's Emperor Realm. However, he had stopped at this realm his entire life. Even the boundless great solar Buddha venerate, and the others were looking at Mo Li with a strange look in their eyes. You really have a good plan. Originally, it was to determine the most talented people in each universe, but you brought out such an old cutie. Sky Phoenix sneered. What do you know? You can't imagine Mo Li's talent. In terms of sword Dao attainments, I'm afraid that even you can't compare. The Archaeosaurus squinted. At this time, Lin Yu and the others noticed Mo Li. The power of Tao law displayed by his body was indeed not like that of an Emperor realm cultivator. He was even much stronger than an ordinary Saint realm cultivator, but he had not broken through to the Emperor realm. This person has great perseverance. He suppressed his realm at the Emperor realm for his entire life just to consolidate. Now, after passing through the chaotic heart forest, he seems to have understood something. Even Sui Shui could not help but praise. This kind of person had great perseverance. If he consolidated enough, he would definitely be able to soar into the sky in the future. Everyone stopped talking. The trial world created by Lin Yu began to assign their opponents. Qin Yi was up against Qin Tianming. Chen Ryu versus Jiang Luo. Su Xin versus Jiu Ling. As for the two most promising cultivators among the Emperor Realm cultivators, they fought each other for the first time. The man from Universe 6 with the Rock bloodline and Mo Li. The rest of the contestants were assigned to their respective opponents. In the Dreamland, the 12 universes did not perform well. But in the Spirit King realm, it was shocking. This was because 9 out of 10 people came from the 12 universes. They were the children who had grown up when Lin Yu was preaching. Among them, there was a skinny young man in sackcloth who was rather eye-catching. The blood chi in his body was extremely terrifying. Although he had a mortal body, he was no weaker than some of the geniuses with blood meridians. This person also attracted Lin Yu's attention. On the high platform, Lin Zhanyu was somewhat dispirited. In his opinion, the battles of the younger generation were really boring. He had already eaten a lot of things. It seemed that when he was in Universe 7, he was so hungry that he panicked. But when he saw the young man in sackcloth, his eyes couldn't help but reveal a trace of light. I like that kid. When the time comes, big brother, how about giving him to me as a disciple? Lin Zhanyu said to Lin Yu. But Qin Munyan was a little unhappy. This was a good seedling of his 12 universes. If he was given a Lin Zhanyu, wouldn't the strength of Universe 7 rise by a level in the next grand competition? Of course, there's no problem. Lin Yu smiled. Lin Zhanyu's battle body was very powerful and had supreme body refining techniques. He was now the person with the highest battle strength in the 12 universes, excluding Lin Yu. That kid looks so likable, Lin Zhanyu said as he began to stare at the young man. But he was a person who looked like a child, so it was a little funny to call the young man a kid. He no longer cared about the others and looked at the young man's battle. And this young man was the young man who climbed up the call and listened to the sermon back then. Because on the path of cultivation, one's lifespan was extremely long. Now, with the young man's age, in the eyes of Lin Yu and the others, he was still a young man. The battle became more and more intense. On the other hand, Qin Yi and Qin Tianming were fighting. Originally, the battle between the two Qins was eye-catching. It was just that the battle between the two of them was like playing house. Qin Yi didn't face it head-on, but kept dodging. Some people were guessing that Qin Yi only had the Tao of movement, which was very profound. But in terms of battle strength, she was lacking. There were many people who came to the Divine King City to watch the ceremony. Among them, there were a large number of cultivators who were having intense discussions. They spoke their thoughts. Big Sister Yu Qing's movement technique is indeed profound, Qin Yi muttered at this moment. She was dodging the blazing sword light slashed by Qin Tianming. On Qin Tianming's broadsword, there were runes spreading. At the same time, the sword technique was wide open. Terrifying explosions rose and fell one after another. If it wasn't for the stability of the trial space created by Lin Yu in the outside world, when two saints fought like this, even the star domain would have been destroyed. I'm not fighting anymore. I'm not fighting anymore. Qin Yi said slowly. She raised the white flag directly, and under the astonished gazes of the crowd, she directly admitted defeat and jumped off the stage. Are you looking down on me? Qin Tianming was a little angry. During this exchange, he could clearly feel that Qin Yi hadn't used her full strength. She just used this movement technique and seemed to be toying with him. I only know movement techniques, but I can delay you. In the long run, I can only lose. You are very strong. Qin Yi spread her hands and said helplessly. This scene was seen by the spectators. A look of realization appeared on their faces, and someone even stood up. He was proud of his judgment and said, I told you. Qin Yi only knows movement skills. However, he is well aware of his own shortcomings. To be able to admit defeat, to be able to pick up and let go, he is also a true man. Qin Tianming was a little stunned for a moment. This competition was won too easily, and it made him a little unsatisfied. Qin family's boy, work harder. Before Qin left, she encouraged him like an old man. This couldn't help but make Qin Tianming speechless. If Qin hadn't jumped off the stage, he would have waved his strongest sword again. As for the other battles, they were much more intense. Chen Ruoyu activated the mountain-embracing seal, and the sacred mountain descended. The entire battle platform was shaking violently. The mountain was bigger than the stars, and it directly pressed down on Jiang Luo. Between Jiang Luo's hands, a mysterious trajectory was formed. The sacred mountain that weighed more than hundreds of millions of kilograms was directly dissolved. Not even a trace of it was left. It's the power of space. Lin Yu and the others saw it at a glance. Lin Yu's eyes had a familiar feeling. Su Yishui sneered at the side. Divine King Lin, are you familiar? This is an incomplete supreme technique from the supreme of the 12 universes in the past, Su Yishui explained. Lin Yu and the others knew that the supreme of the 12 universes in the past had a close relationship with the 5th universe. It was understandable that there was an incomplete supreme technique passed down. Lin Yu laughed. It seemed that his first ancestor was also deeply in love. Chapter 1286. Although Jiang Luo's spatial technique was a bit shallow, and it was difficult for him to exert terrifying power at his realm. However, in this competition, it was likely that winning was no longer a problem. At this moment, Jiang Luo moved forward, and in the blink of an eye, she arrived in front of Chen Ruoyu. Immediately after, her jade palm shot out. Chen Ruoyu wanted to resist, but the pair of hands with terrifying power appeared on the other side. Chen Ruoyu's expression changed slightly, and when he wanted to withdraw to resist, it was already too late. He was directly sent flying 100 feet away, and blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth. The goddess of the 5th universe has terrifying means. Chen Ruoyu smiled and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. In his hand, the phantom of the sacred mountain condensed again. But this time, the sacred mountain in his hand had changed. What was surprising was that he was actually evolving the sacred mountain of the trial world created by Lin Yu. However, with his current realm, it was still difficult to completely condense it. But with this idea, it was enough to amaze people. The sacred mountain began to emit the power of space and time. I wonder how you will resolve this blow, goddess. Chen Ruoyu smiled. He stood in the void, and the phantom of the sacred mountain was above his head. He knew that it was impossible for him to master the Tao of time and space. If he wanted to defeat Jiang Luo, he could only evolve his own magical power and condense the sacred mountain here. Before this, Chen Ruoyu had already perceived that this trial world had a strong power of space and time. He was now relying on this power to resist the secret space technique mastered by Jiang Luo. Even Jiang Luo's face changed slightly, and she couldn't help but be moved. However, she still used the supreme, incomplete technique of space. Here, a turbulent flow of space appeared, time against space. It was very rare to see in the Sage realm. Regarding Chen Ruoyu's idea, even Su Yishui and others couldn't help but praise. Divine King Lin, this is shameless. She actually borrowed your Tao law. Su Yishui joked. However, she wasn't worried about Jiang Luo. Jiang Luo hadn't used her strongest power yet. Boom! The power of space fiercely collided with each other. Fortunately, the Tao law of the trial world was very stable. Otherwise, the void here might be destroyed because of this. In the trial world, the competition was getting more and more intense. It was unknown when Qin Yi had arrived beside Lin Yu in a green dress and found a place to sit down. She gasped. He seemed to have used his magic power to run over. Qin Wenyan also noticed why Qin Yi wasn't around when she walked out of the battle stage. Even his aura could no longer be sensed. When he saw Qin Yi arrive, he seemed to have understood something. He originally wanted to reprimand Qin Yi for giving up so easily. But now his expression had become strange. "How do you feel?" Goddess Yu Qing smiled at Qin Yi. Sui Shui naturally knew that Qin Yi was Qin Yi in disguise. "Not bad," Qin Yi said. "I'm just embarrassed to take first place." This was the real reason why Qin Yi admitted defeat. If he really won the grand competition, it would be hard to justify it. It would give people ideas. She was only participating in the competition for fun. None of them said anything about this. "Little sister Yi, even if you reach the end, you might not be able to win," Su Yishui teased. However, she was telling the truth. Qin Yi could have broken through to the Divine King realm under the guidance of Lin Yu. It was just because she needed to settle down. She could take this opportunity to sneak into the competition of the Saint realm. However, in this competition, Jiang Luo's strength was not to be underestimated. He had been personally taught by Luo and even passed down a supreme technique. His strength was not weaker than Qin Yi's. "Then I should give it a try." Qin Yi pouted. However, with his current status, he naturally wouldn't compete with the younger generation. Joking, she began to eat the immortal fruit wine and watched the next battle with interest. In the end, although Chun Ryu had great courage and condensed the phantom of the sacred mountain many times, he was still defeated after Jiang Luo used the hidden power in his body. The little saintess of the Wangxian sect, Su Xan, also won. This made Qin Wenyan's mood slightly better. In the blink of an eye, it was already the second round. Su Xian won. Next was Jiang Luo's battle against Qin Tianming. "It seems that the kid of the Qin clan is in danger," Qin Yi said with a smile. Jiang Luo's strength was obvious to all. Now, Qin Tianming's expression gradually became serious. The broadsword was swung wildly. The battle platform was almost torn apart. However, in the end, he still won. Everyone knew that Qin Tianming had used all his strength. He was indeed amazing. Unfortunately, he met Jiang Luo, the future heir of the fifth universe. In the Battle of the Emperor Realm, the first round gradually came to an end. Emoli won. He stood on the high platform, drunk. Sword Qi surrounded his body. The great rock bloodline was pierced in many places. Regretfully, he lost. As time passed, the competition was about to come to an end. Sui Shui had been in a calm state. With a smile on her face, she said, "It seems that I can't give away my godly king weapon." The Archaeosaurus was furious. However, the Dark Priest was calm. Qin Tianming was his disciple. He didn't show any signs of defeat. On the contrary, he was very satisfied with Qin Tianming's performance. As long as he was taught carefully, he might be able to join the ranks of the strong. The following battle between Jiang Luo and Su Xian ignited the atmosphere of the entire venue. This was definitely the most important battle in this grand competition. Both of them had used their strongest techniques. Su Xian had also been taught by Lin Yu. At this moment, she could calmly deal with Jiang Luo's spatial techniques. Although Su Xian was only a mortal, the power in her body was not the slightest bit comparable to the legendary terrifying physiques in the universe. Now, Jiang Luo was also using her full strength. A hazy radiance gradually enveloped her slender figure. She was actually a physique. So that's how it is. The great sun Boundless Buddha said slowly. It was rare to see such a physique in many eras. Now, it was actually born in the fifth universe. There was no limit to the talent of this physique. It was innate. In terms of cultivation speed, it was thousands of miles a day. It was difficult to estimate. Even in the ancient books, there were no accurate records of this physique. Now, Jiang Luo's figure became hazy. The domain of the physique was unfolded. She seemed to have completely mastered spatial magic now. Following the strange movements, cracks appeared in the space. Qin Ji, who was at the side, could not help but sweat for her grand disciple. However, to be able to reach this level, it was enough to see how amazing Su Xian was. She did not start cultivating at birth. When she was 7 or 8 years old, she was discovered by Lin Yu and the Jade Pure Goddess in a human city in the primordial world. Then, she went to the Forgotten Immortals sect to cultivate and revealed her terrifying talent. To be able to reach this level with a mortal physique, even the people watching from the stands could not help but change their expression slightly. Jiang Luo was too powerful. In the battle between the two of them, even a divine king powerhouse would find it difficult to completely suppress them. Sword light crisscrossed, and glorious aura surged into the sky. Both of them had used their strongest techniques. Su Xian did not have any physique, but she had a heart that led to the supreme great Tao. At the same time, her talent was also unprecedented. Therefore, until now, she had evolved her techniques to the extreme and still had not been defeated. The collection of the 12 universes was extremely rich. When Su Xian was traveling, she also obtained her own fortune in the 12 universes. At this moment, she was evolving that technique. Everything seemed to be returning to nothingness. Chapter 1287. This kind of technique was very terrifying. In an instant, it disintegrated the domain of the leaving heaven Tao physique. The battle platform here was in an unstable state. It was slowly cracking open. There were still many secrets hidden in the universe. Needless to say, Su Xian's opportunity and fortune were also shocking. She could find the supreme, incomplete technique in the 3 realms and 5 domains. Now that she had used it, she could make everything fall into silence. This was from the origin. Perhaps even a divine king would be seriously injured under this attack. Su Yixue was surprised. At the same time, Jiang Luo did not hold back either. This was the final blow. Neither of them held back. Both of them had used their strongest techniques. Rumble. At this time, the entire divine mountain was shaking. The world created by Lin Yu was originally limited to the Saint realm, the peak, and did not exceed the early divine king realm. But now, under the battle of 2 saints, the divine mountain was collapsing again. At this time, the power of the law of time appeared and returned everything here to its original state. However, the contestants on the lower 2 levels all sensed this terrifying fluctuation and involuntarily looked up. Everything was settled. Both of them were seriously injured. Neither of them gave up and still wanted to struggle to get up. They both leaned on their swords and half knelt on the ground. However, it was obvious that Jiang Luo's injuries were lighter. She slowly propped herself up. Both of their origin had been injured. You are very strong. Jiang Luo was not stingy with her praise. But now, Su Xian's injuries were too serious. Now, she could barely speak. Both of their origin had been injured. The winner was decided. Both of them were teleported out of the trial world. They appeared on the square. Whether it was the creatures who were eliminated or the creatures who were here to watch the battle, they all looked at the two of them with awe. The two of them came to the high-level position of the 12 universes. They supported each other. Obviously, the two of them did not have feelings for each other. Grandmaster, I am sorry. Su Xian's eyes were sad. Qingji stepped forward and said with relief, You have done very well. Su Xian's strength was obvious to all. Being able to display such combat strength in the Saint Realm was very rare in the universe. At least in an era, it was hard to see such a talented genius. Furthermore, she was fighting with a mortal body. She had lost because of her supreme physique, so it wasn't a loss. As for other aspects, she wasn't inferior to Jiang Luo at all. Lin Yu used the power of the God King's order to heal their injuries. Even his origin had been healed. The two of them knelt on the ground and expressed their gratitude to Lin Yu. This era is really magnificent. It can become the beginning of the Golden Age. Su Yixue slowly said. According to ancient records, there would be a Dharma-ending age in the universe, followed by a Golden Age. It was like a cycle of reincarnation. Now, in the present age, Another grand occasion was about to occur. Even the departing heavenly Tao physique is difficult to be revered. Su Ishue praised. As she spoke, she opened her hand and handed the God King armament that she had personally refined to Su Exine. This couldn't help but make the contestants below jealous. However, Su Exine stood up and refused directly. She cupped her hands and said, "Thank you for your kindness, God King Su, but since I have failed in the competition, I have lost. I am not qualified to take this artifact." Su Exine naturally knew the value of this God King armament. This was personally refined by a peak Ancestor Realm powerhouse, and it was protected by the Tao Law. Not bad, not bad. Su Ishue didn't force it. You are a supreme weapon yourself. Finally, Su Ishue said. Su Exine knew her own shortcomings. Now, the sword retreated and came behind Qin Ji. Everyone looked at her with admiration. It seems that God King Lin, your 12 universes have produced a good seedling. Su Ishue praised. Lin Yu smiled. The competition had now come to an end. On the field, there were 3 winners. Saint Realm, Jiang Luo. Emperor Realm, Mo Li. Spirit King Realm, the youth in linen clothes. They received admiring and awe-inspiring gazes. They received rewards. Lin Yu also personally went down. Everyone's eyes were burning with passion. The current Lin Yu is already the supreme powerhouse in the universe. To be able to receive his personal teachings, how enviable was that? This place was enveloped by the Tao law of time and space. Lin Yu didn't make a move, but there was a feeling that the great Tao was simple. The benefits that they received were also huge. Jiang Luo's spatial technique was perfected by Lin Yu. At Lin Yu's realm, mastery of one technique would lead to mastery of all techniques. His attainments in the Sword Tao were also extremely high. It allowed Mo Li to be enlightened and break through to the Saint Realm. The youth's name was Zhou Yun, and the blood qi on his body became as deep as the sea. This was only the superficial benefit. What was even more terrifying was that they received Lin Yu's personal teachings and even passed down some of his own insights. This would benefit the 3 of them for the rest of their lives. The first grand competition will end here. Geniuses from various universes, I hope that you will continue to work hard. Don't be discouraged and break through the great Tao in the future. Qin Wenyan stepped forward and said slowly. At this time, Archaeosaurus was showing off and provoking Sky Phoenix. It's a deal. Hand over the things. The heavenly phoenix looked askance at the side and handed the promised bet to the first Qilin. After being suppressed for so many years, Archaeosaurus finally felt relieved. Let's have another competition 1,000 years later. Sky Phoenix said, 1,000 years? You want to give something again? Archaeosaurus asked. We'll see when the time comes. Sky Phoenix said ruthlessly. He had been in charge of Universe 6 for too short a time, so he didn't have time to properly screen. As a result, none of the winners were from Universe 6. After the grand competition ended, everyone didn't leave immediately. With permission, these people who came to participate could enter the space created by Lin Yu and cultivate for a year. Time there was hundreds of times slower than the outside world. Moreover, it was full of glorious energy, time, and space. There were many kinds of Tao laws, which were of great benefit to cultivation. Those who were familiar with it all gathered in the main hall. After the grand competition, the 12 universes held a grand event. However, they were all Lin Yu's former close friends. At the grand event, everyone sighed. Lin Yu didn't have the arrogance of a divine king and sat side by side with everyone. Goddess Yuqing sat beside him, and Qin Yi poured wine. Su Ishue was at the side. Everyone drank and chatted happily, recounting the exciting past of the past. The wine was intoxicating. No one deliberately refined it with their realm. While toasting, they were all a little tipsy. The primordial Qilin stood on the table. He turned into a golden-haired, middle-aged man. At this moment, holding a wine glass, he recounted the past and said, "Thinking back to the past, I was invincible in the 3 realms and 5 regions. In the end, didn't someone cut off his horn and hide somewhere?" Sky Phoenix, who was at the side, raised her wine glass and said slowly, That was because he was ambushed by the six-winged divine king. Otherwise, do you think he would have lived to the end? Archaeosaurus argued, unwilling to admit defeat. Chapter 1288. The two had already quarreled in front of the table. In the end, the dark god priest and the others came out to mediate. Otherwise, it was very likely that the heavenly phoenix would propose another fight. Lin Yu looked at this scene with emotions in his heart. This was what he wanted to see and what he had worked so hard for. When everything is settled, we can leave everything behind and meet up with a few good friends to live in seclusion, Lin Yu said to Goddess Yuqing, Qin Yi, and the others. The two nodded. You're not bringing me? Su Yishui said with some dissatisfaction. However, it was more of a joke. If you want, of course, Lin Yu said with a smile. It was just that Su Yishui's eyes unconsciously revealed a sad expression. Because her master was the youngest daughter of the utmost being, she knew a lot of secrets. Su Yishui knew how difficult it was to live that kind of life. Even the combined forces of the utmost beings back then could not quell everything. In this world, there was no utmost being in the universe. If the Black Calamity really came one day, who could resist it? Su Yishui didn't know. After the original God realm, it was Tao attraction. At that time, heaven and earth couldn't restrain it, and the laws of the universe couldn't harm it. However, even in this realm, there was still a long way to go before the first divine king, which was the utmost being. In the current world, there was no such expert. Today, we just need to drink and chat. Don't think too much about other things. Goddess Yuqing saw Su Yishui's worries. She said, That's true. Su Yishui smiled and said, With my realm, wouldn't it be groundless worries? Divine King Su, come and drink. Qin Yi's face was flushed, and her eyes were blurred. She seemed to be drunk. She hadn't been so relaxed for a long time. Lin Yu had been fighting against enemies all these years. She was worried all the time. It wasn't easy to have time to get together. It made her feel very relieved. Call me sister. It's younger. Su Yishui raised her wine cup and said with a smile, Sister Su, let's drink. Qin Yi drank the wine in one gulp. However, in the eyes of Lin Yu and the others, she looked extremely adorable. You're already drunk, drink less. Goddess Yuqing smiled and took the cup from Qin Yi's hand. No, I can still drink 10 cups. No, 10 bowls. Bring me and big sister Su bowls. Qin Yi staggered out of the hall. Not long after, he returned with a bowl the size of a human head. There were 3 in total. She included the jade, pure divine maiden. Come, sisters, drink. Qin Yi held a big bowl. As she drank, the wine leaked out, soaking most of her dress. Why aren't you drinking? Qin Yi asked angrily. Su Yishui did not know whether to laugh or cry. Even the jade, pure divine maiden could not bring herself to eat. However, she couldn't dissuade Qin Yi. In the end, the two of them picked up the big bowl and drank it. The jade, pure divine maiden felt uneasy. This was the first time she drank with a bowl. Making such a cold goddess drink wine with a big bowl, her bashful attitude made people unable to restrain themselves from laughing. Lin Yu did not stop her. He just smiled faintly and accompanied her. In the end, Qin Yi leaned on Lin Yu's shoulder. She kept scooping wine from the wine jar and pinching Lin Yu's face. She was feeding Lin Yu wine. She looked very cute. Lin Yu chatted and laughed with the dark divine priest and the others while receiving the wine. Even the dark divine priest did not know what to say for a moment. But now a few hours had passed. They were all drunk. The scene was very lively. Back in the day, before Divine King Lin had grown up, I had led him on a campaign to conquer the world. The Archaeosaurus stood on the chair and laughed loudly. Now, his realm was no longer the same. However, his character was more amusing than before. He did not have the slightest arrogance of an expert. He and the heavenly phoenix did not deal with each other. Now that the wine had emboldened him, he actually clung to the heavenly phoenix and said, Heavenly Phoenix, until now, I still don't know whether you are a man or a woman. Remove the fog on your face and let me have a good look. As he spoke, he reached for the heavenly phoenix's face. The Archaeosaurus was an auspicious beast between heaven and earth, but he did not have the calmness of an auspicious beast. Bang! The glazed tiles on the divine king's palace shattered. With an ouch, the Archaeosaurus figure fell from the sky. He fell straight onto the square in the distance. There were disciples cultivating in the sky city of the 12 universes here. At this moment, looking at the huge pit in the square, they all went forward in shock. It was not until the smoke and dust dissipated that the Archaeosaurus staggered out of the huge pit. Lord Archaeosaurus, are you all right? Among the young commanders of this generation, they stepped forward and asked with concern, I'm fine. What's the matter with me? The Archaeosaurus stood up with his hands behind his back. With the posture of an expert, he continued, I came here to see if you are cultivating seriously. The commander immediately knelt on the ground and pointed around. But now, most of them had awakened from their cultivation. Not bad, not bad. The Archaeosaurus looked around and nodded in satisfaction. The commander followed closely behind, feeling great pressure. He was afraid that the Archaeosaurus would say that they were not cultivating seriously. I see that you are cultivating very hard. For the sake of the 12 universes, you can't relax in the slightest. The Archaeosaurus lectured. He directly opened his storage space and said, Come forward. Each of you can choose a divine object. He said slowly with his hands behind his back. All of this caused everyone to be incomparably astonished. For a moment, no one dared to step forward. For the sake of the 12 universes, it is natural for us to cultivate. We dare not accept the praise of the Archaeosaurus. The commander hurriedly knelt on the ground and said in fear, Sir, please take back your order. Sir, take back your order. Everyone present was pleading. They had already smelled the strong smell of alcohol. They knew that the Archaeosaurus was drunk and couldn't be taken seriously. Are you looking down on the Archaeosaurus? The Archaeosaurus glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. I don't dare. The commander hurriedly said, If you don't dare, then why don't you come and choose? The Archaeosaurus continued, If word gets out, won't they say that the Archaeosaurus don't have a collection? In the end, the commander couldn't persuade the Archaeosaurus. He could only let everyone go forward one by one to choose the divine objects. There were a few thousand people here. Not long after, more than half of the things in the Archaeosaurus storage space were taken away. At this time, the sea god dragon came to see what had happened to the Archaeosaurus. Looking at the Archaeosaurus, he didn't go forward to stop them. It wasn't until everyone had taken their things that he came forward and said, Archaeosaurus, let's go. Did you all get it? The Archaeosaurus was still asking with concern. We got it, we got it. The commander also had a stalk of divine herb in his hand. At this time, he was a little scared. He felt that it was a hot potato and was a little restless. They had specially chosen it and didn't have any valuable items. Yes, we got it. Thank you, Archaeosaurus. The sea god dragon said with a smile, Don't worry. I said that I'll give it to you. Just take it and remember to use it for your cultivation. After hearing the sea god dragon's words, only then did everyone smile. Since the sea god dragon said so, there shouldn't be a problem to take these things. Thank you, Sir Archaeosaurus. Sir Chelan, may you live a long life. Hearing their words, the primordial Chelan smiled in satisfaction. He then gave them a few more instructions, telling them to cultivate well. Then, he left with the sea god dragon. The event continued. However, it was getting more and more lively. Everyone's spirits were high. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.